once again to the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get our site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. My name is Brian Vitale, and let me go through who is with me here today. Joining me is Josh Torres.
Hi, hello.
Adam Vitale.
Hello.
James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
Chow Min Woo.
Hello.
And joining us, I believe for the first time, we have Scott White.
Howdy. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going well. And Scott, we have mentioned on the podcast previously, he has written some of the reviews for the site early in the year, including Monarch and the Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster reviews. And the reason we have asked him to join us on the podcast this week is for the game of the week that we will be starting off today. And that is, of course, Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. So this game has been a topic of the podcast since its announcement, going from the, almost the meme status announcement of the game with all the chaos and all that stuff surrounding that, and going into actually an earnest eagerness to see how exciting this game might actually be. And now we're here, and Scott was obviously happy enough to write the review for that. So we will just start off with handing it off to Scott to talk about Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. So, okay, Scott, I guess I have to start out with basically saying, when you approached this game, I don't know if you were eager to play it because you had history with the Neo series, or you had history with the Final Fantasy series, or you just thought the game looked endearing, or basically, what was your mindset when you first sat down to play Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin?
Sure. So going into it, I'm a big fan of the Neo games. I love Neo 1, and then all the improvements they did with Neo 2. I love that. And of course, huge Final Fantasy fan. So coming to Stranger of Paradise, I was for a good long while, especially after the initial announcement, I was kind of hesitant. I was like, I don't know how this will be. But when the first demo release and I got to try the combat, that's what really sold me on the game. So really, since that first demo came out, I was like, okay, I think this could be a lot of fun. Just the gameplay really hooked me. I didn't try the second demo because I just wanted to play the actual game. I didn't want to spoil myself or whatnot. So diving in, I was going from a very optimistic, excited to play it mentality. Coming from mostly the Neo side of the things, because yeah,
I mean, that makes sense, because I think many of us here had really high opinions of especially Neo 2. I think on at least my list, and maybe Adam's as well, it was our top game of that year. So knowing that even though it wasn't the same team behind it, but it was from the same developer, but that we also had some discussions about the demo as it released, and I believe both Josh and James have played through both that demo as well as the retail release just now. So we'll see their existing opinions as well. And this ended up being one of the most anticipated games of the spring for us. As speaking generally, I have it purchased, but I haven't started it yet. And I know that Adam has aspirations of getting to it as well. So, I actually want to go through and say, have you recently played Final Fantasy 1 through the Pixel remasters, or did you only play 4 through 6?
Nope, I did 1 through 3 and then 4 through 6, yeah.
All right. Now, I'm going to ask a silly question. How much does this actually tie into Final Fantasy 1, or is it kind of a complete reimagining that feels pretty divorced from it?
It is. I wouldn't say it's fully divorced. It very much sets up the... It is both a prequel as well as an alternate telling. It's really pretty interesting, but in general, it adds a lot of kind of fluff and kind of science fiction-y mumbo jumbo to it, but it does serve as a prequel, and it does set up, especially the ending, which I won't necessarily go into, but it does set up and lead directly into the original Final Fantasy.
So this is the origin of all Final Fantasy games, Stranger of Paradise.
Yep, you heard it here first.
It's true. Jack invented the Final Fantasy theme, as we know.
Jack is the father of Final Fantasy.
It's pretty good.
It's true. It does do some interesting things to try and put all of the Final Fantasy games into like a singular multi-dimensional traversed universe.
To be fair, it's far from the first spin-off to do something like that. I mean, obviously this is the Dissidia team, which did that like over a decade ago. So
yeah, that's what I was going to get at. It's so it's by Team Ninja, but it's not by the Neo team. Do I have that correct?
It's by the Dissidia team. Yep.
Yeah, it's just you have to be careful because they market it as saying like from the studio behind Neo, but then you have to be like careful and be like, actually, the Dissidia team. So I want to make sure.
Yeah, it is easy to make that like connection because the way they laid it out is sort of like how Neo did it, where they had like an alpha test or like an alpha, release of it, and then from that, it's like they actually had like a pretty comprehensive survey of like, okay, what did you like, what did you dislike about this, and that was very much the same. The very first Neo. Of like, yeah, it's both by Team Ninja. The way they started like laying out their games, like, hey, we'll have you like test an early build of it, and then you tell us, what you liked and disliked about it, and then they make substantial changes to the final product from that. Like they actually listen to the feedback, and and as we've seen from the Neo games and now to this, it's like it's really paid off in the long run for how these games have come together in development.
So paint a picture for me who hasn't booted this up yet. So Neo 2, I've only played Neo 2, I haven't played the original. It is a Souls-like, sorry to use that term, but it's very segmented into like individual chapters that you select from a menu. In Neo, it's maps of the different time periods. Is Final Fantasy Origin? I guess I want to figure out like a shorthand to call it. Is Stranger set up the same way where you're like selecting missions from a menu where that you can then replay?
Yep, it's all mission based. Like you have a mission select screen, kind of like a world map with different little missions that you can select, vary in the similar style as Neo was. You select it, you complete the main mission, and then once that's done, usually one, sometimes two side missions will unlock once you finish a area's main mission.
Yeah. All right, so that sounds very similar to Neo.
Yep.
Yeah, you'll be right at home with like the interface because it'll have like the Final Fantasy 1 map overworld like on it, and then you'll just see like little nodes saying, "Okay, you can go to here." It's like a stage, so you'll be right at home.
I know some people are like really into like having to have this like diegetic. I don't know. I kind of like the arcadey setup of more like just having bespoke selectable missions rather than having everything like we all enjoy having our open world games, whether they're Elden Ring style or Horizon Forbidden West style. But I don't know. There's something about just have more arcadey setup like that I actually do kind of enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I just like sometimes I just want short gameplay burst sessions, and then it's really laid out in a way that fits that style. And because it's easy, like say for Elden Ring, like it's easy to like say I'm only gonna play for 30 minutes, and then 3 hours pass by. It's like, oh shit, and that's fine too. But it's one of those like, well, I had other things to do, but all right, I guess.
I mean, like I enjoyed Demon Souls setup of having like the Nexus and just selectable missions from there too. So even FromSoft's done that.
Yeah.
So
the way that like Stranger like just goes beyond like that setup, but like the way the gameplay flows, like you'll be like it's easy to say like Neo is a Souls-like, and like it definitely initially drew inspiration from that. But the way you play those games are vastly different. Neo is very much more aggressive, in your face. Like you're usually sacrificing defense to go on the offensive a lot, while it's the Souls games you're more it's a more slower paced game even when you're playing it aggressively. While Neo and Stranger are just like you're at it constantly. You're at full throttle when you want to go.
And there's so much more of an emphasis on gear. It's almost like a Diablo or a Path of Exile. Like that gear is so much a bigger part of these like Stranger or Neo's gameplay loop than your traditional Souls game.
Well, I remember in Neo. Oh, sorry, I thought you were at the end of your conversation. No. But I remember in Neo, I would almost have to like set up earmarked time to be like, okay, I've done 3 or whatever number of missions. I literally have to spend 30 minutes at the blacksmith to like go through my gear, like, and it had the different systems for like augmenting which attributes were on your gear or like which bonuses they had, and it almost became like a gameplay mechanic in itself to be like, okay, I can still hear like the smithy sound effects because I spent so much time there in Neo. The thing is though, is usually when there's that degree of, I don't know if you guys will feel similarly, usually when there's that degree of micromanagement, my eyes kind of like glaze over and I'm like, oh, I wish this was streamlined a bit. But in Neo, for whatever reason, I didn't have that response. And I know we're talking about Stranger of Paradise, but not Neo. But I'm wondering, like, when you were doing the item management in Stranger of Paradise, was it engaging and enjoyable, or do you kind of wish it was a little less cumbersome, a little bit more streamlined?
It's one of those things where when you're playing through the story, even on like your standard difficulty, which in this game is just called action, you really don't have to. You can rely on like there's an option when you go into your equipment settings for like the PlayStation. It's just you hit the center pad and then it optimizes equipment. You can get through the main game just optimizing equipment. Whatever's the best as you go, just optimize. You really don't have to worry about tweaking gear, raising the stats, or swapping in bonuses, things like that, until you get to the post game. Once you get there, that's when you have to start worrying about optimizing your gear sets or optimizing your job gear, your party members' gear, all of this to really take on the more difficult challenges. Up until then, you can rely just on optimizing equipment. It's just there is so much gear. You get so many drops, and I mentioned this in my review. It's overwhelming, even for someone who's grown up playing Diablo and loves Neo, loves Path of Exile and whatnot. It's just there is so much gear you get so quickly from the get-go that it just becomes overwhelming.
Now, is most of the gear like worth it, or do you end up just like vendoring or whatever the equivalent is? So, I don't know if there's like you salvage it or vendor it, or
you can dismantle it, which will give you like resources that you can then use to improve the different stats on
very
a weapon.
Neo-like, yeah.
Yeah, it's very Neo-like in that regard.
Yeah, and like as you're going through the game, like, you know, everything like pre-post game stuff, like I've noticed over time that like your gearing at the moment doesn't really matter too much. You just want like gear that's like on your level, because like level disparity like is a big deal in this game. Like say if you're at a level, like say like the average level is like 54 for that level, and your like gear is like level like 49 or 50, like, but they have good affinity bonuses, that won't really serve you in the long run, even if it's like a good like synergistic build, because these are like the numbers just won't make sense to really justify it. Like at some point you're just gonna have to like accept like, okay, I'll do suboptimal sets that at least like, you know, are on the level, so I can like at least do decent damage and take hits when I take them in. Like you never want to be at a point where it's like I'm taking on this level 54 stage, but I have like this level 49 gear set. Like even though it has good affinity bonuses for me, it's still taking a long time to like kill mobs. This is with the caveat that I've only played this game on hard. I haven't touched story difficulty or action difficulty. I've only touched hard difficulty because that's better loot, and like I just enjoy the combat more when things are like immediately exploding.
How hard is hard?
Not too hard, actually.
Okay.
Like it's just like I play the health pools and like things do a little bit more damage, but like honestly, it's not like I don't think it's like hard as difficult.
There are some mechanical differences. In hard, you start off with 2 MP bar chunks. I believe that's not the same if you play on action or story mode.
I actually kind of like that, where it has like some physical differences rather than just being like enemies have 50% more health and you deal 20% less health or whatever, where they actually like scale the difficulty in ways that aren't just tweaking numbers.
Yeah, there's some other stuff there. Like if you like, I think if you go like through story difficulty, there's like a casual mode you can do activate on that as well. That like, you know, if you want to just breeze through it, then by all means you can turn all those settings on, and that's fine, you know. But for me, I'm just like I like seeing high numbers and seeing a lot more like rare loot, and it's fine. It does drop a lot of like fucking equipment, and like you do have to take the time to empty it out because there are storage limits. Like your overall storage, if you place things in storage, I think it has like a cap of like 4,000, but like your on hand pouch is like 500. So I've definitely ran into a case where like it'll say, "Oh, you're already capped out on equipment," because I didn't really like dismantle all that much earlier on. And I'm like, oh shit, I have to go take the time to like go to the smithy and like break down all this shit that I don't need.
It feels like I sorry that I keep bringing this up, but I'm like, yes, I remember this from Neo because it feels so.
Yeah,
the way you guys are describing it feels just so like in the same space.
It is 100% Neo with a Final Fantasy face.
Yeah,
and that like I know you guys are talking about like how it's an overwhelming one. It kind of excites me though. I'm sure like once I see it, I'll be like, oh yeah, this. I remember spending 30 minutes here, and like yes, it's kind of fun to micromanage, but also I just kind of want to fight shit. But it does make sense that you say that the most important thing is just to make sure that your gear is on par with your level rather than trying to figure out the perfect mix of attributes to mesh with the way that you want to play the game.
Yeah, I think that the main thing that really sets us apart from Neo is the job skill tree system in this game. Like with Neo, you had like the obviously the 3 stances to vary your play style, but also like the different weapon trees in Neo. While in this game, just like in Final Fantasy fashion, you have like the classic like job advancement system. So like your additional jobs are like sword fighter, pugilist, mage, and then as you advance through those skill trees, and those skills just like organically level up. Like you're not even thinking about leveling them up; they just kind of happen as you're playing the game. You're just constantly getting like job points as you're playing with that class, and then eventually at the end of their skill trees that do branch, like there'll be like nodes that say, okay, you can unlock this advanced job like pugilist into monk, or I forget the other one it evolves into.
Thief, I want to say.
Yeah, it's like thief. And for some of those job advancement nodes, like if you want to unlock the thief class, you need to have like the bandit and like the pugilist class, like both reaching that same node to unlock the thief class. So there's, I was surprised because there's a big emphasis on like speccing to multiple classes and trying out like almost every class, because you want to have options. You want to see how the other classes play, so it really encourages that instead of just like hard speccing into like, okay, I'm only going to be the pugilist into monk into whatever, because at some point you have to switch to another class to get to that monk node, or for the tyrant job you need to like go into another class. Like I had to like go into spellcasting for a bit and go mess with like the mage and then the sage to unlock that class, because the way it handles like you imbue like magic into your fists in that class, so it makes sense to level that up. But I was surprised that like, okay, this game really encourages you to try out like all of its job systems, not just like hard spec into like a set path, and I really like that.
Yeah, one thing I think that's also worth noting is that sometimes pieces of equipment will have affinity for specific jobs, and if you have those armor pieces equipped, even if you're not using that job, you'll be accruing XP for it slowly as you're going through the game. So like even little tricks like that, and also the fact that like you'll get like anima like shards every time you finish a stage, whether it's in single player or co-op or whatnot, and you can like spend those to get XP for specific jobs. So even if you just hardline focus on one specific type of play style, by the time you're done with the game, just passively, you're going to max out most of the jobs. And I really like how that works out. It makes it
what is an anima shard?
So anima shard is basically like a consumable that you get, and then you can use those anima shards to get job experience for a class. So you go to like the job tree and like say, I want a level warrior, but like it's at level 1, and I want to play with all like the other skills that it already has. So if you have anima shards on hand, you can just like slam down like say like 10 of those, and then you get like a crap load of job experience for that warrior class. So you can begin to unlock like nodes in the skill tree immediately. So it's just a way to like just immediately like level up classes, so you don't have to like write them up manually from like square one.
Well, that seems like it jives with the idea of wanting to encourage leveling multiple classes.
Yeah.
And again, with the Neo, I'm like the way that the weapon, like in that game, it basically is based on there are no bespoke classes. It's just which weapon you have equipped and how they scale with your different attributes. And maybe I just wasn't adventurous enough, but I only ever really used one weapon type because you would kind of learn the different. I forget exactly what it's called, but it had the skill tree specific to the weapons that would unlock your different stances or weapon arts or whatever they're called in that game. I forget. And because of that, like if you did want to try another weapon, you would have to start at kind of square one.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's where it really diverges from Stranger and Neo. It's just like this one, you're encouraged to do multiple. While with Neo, I agree with you that like it definitely pushed you to like, hey, go pick a weapon, but you're gonna stick with that weapon unless you really want to start over and learn another weapon. But you have to like manually go through its paces again.
So this might be in opposition to that idea, but I do want to ask, just because I'm curious. The three people that have played this game significantly so far, Scott, Josh, and James, like what class you have, I guess, jived with the most. I'll start with Scott. Like, what class did you end up playing as for the majority of your time in Stranger?
Yeah, I really, really liked Thief. A class that can use both fists and daggers, and punching things I just feel is really good in this game. And the other class was really just kind of whatever I needed to level up at the time. So my main class was definitely Thief. And then towards the end it was Swordsman, which was like a greatsword using class. And one of the nice things about each class is each class has a unique ability all its own. Like the duelist, which is kind of the basic dagger job that you have right at the beginning, its ability is called Weak Spot, which you press it and the attack automatically does a critical hit. Thief, you can
that seems nice.
Yeah, it's super nice. You don't have to be kind of behind the enemy to deal the critical damage. The Thief lets you grab, and basically you can absorb certain abilities from enemies and then hurl them back. Thief, it lets you steal said ability without having to have that ability cast at you and absorbed. So that I found that really, really helpful. Plus, then just being able to punch dudes from behind was a.
It sounds like you
help.
just like punching people.
Yep.
Punching people's
that and daggers. That was my main thing. I also Ronin, one of the katana wielders, was really good too because of their countering abilities. But yeah, Thief was my go-to class.
How about you, Josh?
I've been really, really liking the feel of punching in this game. So I've done Pugilist into Monk into Tyrant. The way that this was like one of the few games that really nails the feeling of like punching things.
Apparently so. Punching things feels good here.
Yeah, there's like a really nice, punchy feeling every time you like do an attack with it. And like the strings are fast, they're fluid. And then if you need to go on the defensive, like it supports, instantly dodging out of like combo strings or like or going on the defensive but blocking. So like it's all very responsive, it's all very fluid. I enjoy it a lot. The ability that I like, just as a portive one, is Monk's chakra ability, which lets you get rid of all debuffs on you if you instantly, even if you're silenced. So, like, say if you're going against a Marlboro and you get hit by a bad breath, you're like, okay, no sweat, I'll just do chakra, and then all those debuffs are gone. So that's been my class of choice for the most part. For secondary classes, I've just been doing whatever like needs to be, unlocked for other jobs. So I've done a little bit of spell casting, which has been nice. Done a little bit of swordsman, just a little bit of everything. I haven't really touched like the spear classes yet. I intend to do that, but it's really cool to see like how well they've translated like iconic Final Fantasy job classes into like a really responsive action RPG. And you can still feel like the identity of that class as you play through them.
I guess I wasn't expecting Scott to explain that the thief can kind of like use enemy abilities, because then I would think naturally blue mage, but maybe that's just the way. Like, are there? I guess.
Well, I mean, it's inherent to the game, regardless of your job, that you can actually like copy certain enemy abilities.
Yeah, that's
like enemies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like there's like 3 different types of attacks that enemies do. And it's based off of the color of the banner, which pops up when they start casting it. So like if it's an orange ability, you either want to dodge or soul shield it. If it's a purple ability, if you soul shield it, you'll actually copy that ability. And if it's a red banner, you just have to dodge. It's an unblockable.
Yeah.
And James, I guess while you're going on, what was the class that you ended up playing as?
I will just say that Sage is the square hole of Strangers of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, in the sense that it is kind of overpowered as hell. I'm not sure if you ended up trying Sage, Scott, but
no, not really. I didn't dabble too much in magic.
That's the thing. Like any class can feel overpowered in this game if you synergize with it like hard enough. So like for example, one of my friends is doing like a punch class, but he has like the Berserker Stagger affinity on it, and then he has like regen up and defense and Mighty Guard up. So all he's basically doing is like putting Mighty Guard up and regen, and then he has like affinities that not only let him stagger more easily, but also he gains more MP per hit. So all he has to do is basically press R1, and he has them the enemy in like almost permanently staggered, and just constantly just a barrage of punches endlessly. He's just carrying them from one room to the next room, and like he's unstoppable, you know. Like Tonberry's Cactuars, like nothing phases him. If he gets grabbed by like an ogre, that's no big deal because Mighty Guard is on. So like if you get inventive enough, like any class can feel overpowered with the way that you wanna play, and that's kind of the beauty of this game. Where like you're not hard locked into like a class. Like you have to like do this class to overcome this thing. Sure, there will be like enemies like Flans, for example, that like are resistant to physical attacks. But even like a build like that, you know, like it's not really doing any damage to you. So who cares if it takes a little bit of time to like kill, you know? So it's that it's so cool that like nothing in the game is like telling you, hey, you have to be a certain class. It's always like, hey, play the way you want to at your own pace.
Well, yeah, I always kind of thought. Go ahead, Scott. You go first.
One thing I had to compliment is, and I don't know if you guys felt the same. Your party members, I feel, are competent. Like they're pretty good.
They're okay. Yeah,
they're decent, and as long as you're remembering to constantly like activate their
the resonance stuff, so they use their abilities more often. Yeah,
they're right.
But yeah,
the one thing
I use them
really
a lot
like
in boss fights.
Yeah, it like there's basically it's like a cooldown in 14. Pop it when it's ready.
Yeah, and you'll notice that like. But most of the things that I really like about this game, because I'm a gameplay over story type of person, that's what I really like about this game, is like the story is very much on the secondary back end, while the gameplay is first and foremost like really good. So like I'm kind of I'll forgive it for like any misgivings that like the story to me is hilarious. Like the way story cutscenes are, the way they're choreographed, the way their composition, how weirdly brief and to the point they are. Of like, I love it because I'm just like it gets through that faster. It's like, okay, just cut the bullshit. I just want to play, and like it fully understands that, and like, and in a way that makes Jack and his whole crew charming to me. Like I really like Jack as a character because like it like this game has an option where you can have subtitles of the sound effects on, and man, those are really really good because you'll have all sorts of flavors of like sound effects of like where they have to like switch up the wording. So you'll have like 50 different variants of like Jack angry grunting, and like a different word, like you know that the subs for that are like different words of like exasperated sigh. You know, it's like really good. Yeah, because there's so much of that in this game. It's like so just really like if there's like any filler like air in between conversations, it's usually Jack like doing like an angry grunt or sigh or ugh, you know, just like It's so good. It's so
All
good.
right, let's talk about the story a little bit, because obviously this game seems. Go ahead.
Hot take. I actually kind of enjoyed the story.
So obviously, when this game was first announced, it was kind of like an endearing meme for how over the top and how brash and how like faux edgy, like mid-aughts edgy it was, and a weird, kind of an interesting take on what a Final Fantasy story can be. And then like the Limp Bizkit phone and all the other stuff, and you know, the language. After playing through the game, how do you end up feeling about the tone of Stranger Paradise? I'll start with Scott.
It was passable. Like it didn't do much for me.
Okay.
I think it was serviceable. I am not a fan of Jack. But it was like the gameplay was fun enough that I was like, okay, we'll be along for the ride, and it didn't overstay its welcome. Like if this game had been like a more Final Fantasy length experience, like a 30-hour, 25-hour, 40-hour long game, I'd be like, I never want to touch this game again. But because I think you can comfortably get this done, get the story done in under 20 hours. It was fine. The ending or the last third of the game, I would say, was the most interesting. Enough of the kind of mystery was there for me to be like, okay, I kind of want to see where this goes. But I think the first half, where it follows more of what the original Final Fantasy was, like story wise, was the weaker part. But
so you think the brevity of the game has come almost to its benefit in terms of story?
Yeah, it's like I definitely see where the meme aspects come from, but the whole chaos thing and who cares if you regain your memories, like all like the arguments, especially that Jack has, just it quickly, for me anyway, it quickly devolved from the haha, this is so funny into I know you've said this like 50 times at this point.
It got old. Well, it sounds like you and Josh are kind of on the same page, where you're just like, the story is whatever, but that's not what I'm here for.
Yeah, like it's like it's stupid. Like at times it's fun, but like it's not like anything groundbreaking or shattering. You know, it's just like yeah, you know, it's there to provide enough context for me to just like continue punching things.
I feel like the odd man out, because it's like you're right that like the game is very much gameplay first for the majority of the playtime, but it's like. And I wouldn't even say that the last third is story heavy, more so like the last 3 missions, you just get a ton of cutscene dumps.
Yeah.
Kind of funny. I will say that I do understand that the story is very much going to be a love it or hate it sort of thing. Or I guess in this case, there's also the contingent of folks where it's just like, yeah, I don't really care either way. I think that the story gets props from me for making the Frank Sinatra song fit perfectly when they finally played it at the end.
I don't know if I want to poke at that, because I kind of want to experience that for myself. Because...
Yeah, no, it's impossible to. Well, you can explain it.
I don't want to know.
But yeah, explaining it would just make it sound way dumber than I feel like it's handled like in the game itself. I'm not sure Scott feels the same way, obviously, but I was very surprised when that song came up, and it's like, damn, they actually made it fit.
I think my feelings on like this overall story is perfectly summed up in like 2 cutscenes I've seen so far. One is when you meet the Dark Elf for the first time, and he's about to go on and explain about the history of the Dark Elves. And Jack is like, "Look, I don't care. Just tell us about the crystals. That's all we're here for." And the other one is when you go face against the Lich in the Earth Temple, and then like the Lich is about to like go on and say who the fuck it is, and then Jack just cuts it off and says, "I don't care who the fuck you are," and tries to fucking punch it immediately. And it's like, yeah, that's exactly.
This feels like the way you're describing it almost feels like those YouTube like abridged series sort of comedy, which are kind of like which can be funny if executed well, but can also be done like really bad.
Yeah, and to me, it's like it works because I was like, I think this is where Scott and I diverge. Is like I like Jack as a character because he's so dorky. Like even outside of the cutscenes, you'll have like interactions between the characters during the stages, and there's one memorable one to me when you're going through the flying fortress. And like him and Jack are having a conversation, Jet and Jack, and then there's a certain point where like Jet is like why are you like this? And Jet's like, I don't know, I'm just like this. He's like I guess you're helpful ... sometimes. Like,
there's like moments like that, and it's like, I know people get hung up on the fact that like they even outright said Norman even outright said this is a story about a very angry man, but angry doesn't mean that he is necessarily like mean spirited, which is funny because there's like outright moments where like the party interactions in the dungeons are amazing sometimes.
Yeah, they're really good. Yeah.
Like there's one like between him and I think Neon where Jack outright says, look, I'm sorry if I'm abrasive. It's just how I am.
Yeah. And that's kind of the weird charming part about Jack is like it doesn't really manifest in like proper story cutscenes. Like it's only if you take the time to like read like the dialogue between them in those like brief conversations that like are total one-offs, like very easily missable. And it's like, okay,
he's a simple-minded man, but he knows what he is, and he does it. He means well. And that's the thing I appreciate about it.
Yeah. So like it's like I know a lot of people like that despise the game because like I already hear some people's like, oh, it feels like an anti-Final Fantasy game and like being a parody of Final Fantasy. It's like, it's great.
It is 100% a parody. But
I'm not even sure if I would say it's a parody. I feel like the game is way more sincere than people let on, and I think a
parody doesn't mean it's insincere. That's the thing. Like a parody can't be sincere.
You're right, but I definitely feel like a lot of the people calling it a parody are trying to say, "Oh, it's unintentional in the way, like it with its tone." But no, I mean, it knows exactly what it is. It's very intentional with the sorts of feelings it's trying to elicit, and I do appreciate that.
Yeah, one of the early funny things as I was going through this game before I started it, since I downloaded it for the PC version, so I got the Epic Games launcher and everything installed for it. And after figuring out like why isn't my controller working with this game, it's like, oh, I had to like unplug my arcade stick from my controller input to start working. I went to like the settings option, I went to the brightness options. I'm like, it's your standard like, put it up till you can see like, see the images dimly lit, or you can barely see the images. And then like I kept on raising that slider and like there were no images popping up at all. I'm like, all right, I'm already at max slider brightness, and there's still no images in there. I'm like, am I insane or did I go blind? I'm like, I have no idea. And like, I kept asking like, are there any images? They're like, I don't think so. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm not going insane then.
So you played it on the PC version?
Yeah, I played the PC version. I know a lot of people have been having problems with it. It's not a great PC port by any means. Luckily, my 3080 and 5900X have muscled through most of the problems. There are still problems with like if there's like a lot of like heavy particle effects, or just like or things are crowded up in general, where like the game will like really dip down to like 10 to 15 FPS like at brief moments, where it's just like, oh fuck. But like most of the time, it runs pretty smoothly, like at 120 FPS for me. But I can't imagine like how the game would respond. Let's say if there were 3 sages that cast like Ultima at the same time. Like I don't know what happens to my computer or any console for that matter if that happens. It's like
let's do it for science.
Yeah, it's like you remember Dragon's Crown, and like the sorcerer class in that game had like a big meteor move. And
I
like
remember that game.
Yeah, and that meteor move would just like cloud up everything. You couldn't see shit, and then on the PS2 it would like lag the console. And like if you had 3 of them casting it at the same time, it's like, well, this game's done. It's over.
Yeah, that's basically Ultima.
Yeah, that's basically So I haven't seen what exactly what happens there. I hope someone out there tries it. I'm very interested to see the results. But
so
outside of that, for me, it's been running fine. Obviously, the cutscenes are hard locked to 30 FPS. So like they're
really, because there were some cutscenes that were definitely 60.
There are some like that use the in-game engine, but like say like the ones that are like story sequence, like with the king early on, like that.
That's what you mean. That's what you mean.
Yeah. That is just always going to be 30 FPS no matter what. And it always looks crummy too, because like the shadows always look like shit in those.
Yeah. Well,
the
NPCs
this needs some work.
Yeah, this is actually a good opportunity because Scott, you played it on PlayStation or PS5, right?
PS5, yep.
Yeah, so I played it on Series X. So
got the whole spectrum.
Entirely discounting the last gen versions, which I've seen pictures. Don't play this on last gen. It should run better, but if you're listening to this, don't play this on last gen.
I've seen my friend play through like the PS4 performance mode of this game, and it just looks like pudding, man. It is very
like this is a very fun game. It's great. It should be running better than it does, like especially considering this is the same engine as Nioh 2. It does not look nearly as good as Nioh 2, but it runs so much worse. It's like, God. Not to mention like all the issues with like brightness. Like I had the same issue on Xbox where it's like I went into the brightness settings and it's like these are the same picture. Nothing I do.
It's just a black screen.
Yeah, and it's just like there are like usually it's fine, but then there's like a few levels where it's like, oh, I'm going into the menu, I'm setting the brightness to max. I don't care if it ruins the aesthetic. I need to see what the fuck.
Yeah, there are definitely levels like say early on when you're trying to go meet the dark elf, like ascending that tower. There are definitely like you're traveling on rooftops, like you don't even know where the floor is.
Oh, and, it gets worse.
Yeah, there are definitely later levels where it gets worse, where you just can't see shit on where you're going. So yeah, I mean, it is a game that is like it has its flaws. It's definitely some key flaws, but for me, the gameplay is where it's at, and it feels very fun and fluid, and just they nailed the important things in my heart.
Yep.
Now, one thing that we talked about a little bit before release of the game is the work that Andrea and Alex did about how certain regions of this game are inspired by other Final Fantasy locales, even though they are representing, as far as I understand, Final Fantasy 1 locations. Does that end up playing a big role in the game, or is it more really just kind of fan service in the classic sense?
Okay. So the game doesn't even really make an effort to hide it, but one of the kind of winks and a nudge that the game does is that these locations aren't just based off of other Final Fantasy locations. They are literally like modeled / warped from those locations. And then it's really weird because like you load into a level and it'll like load a fool's missive on the loading screen about that level, and it'll say, hey, this level's from, say, Dimension 14 or Dimension 7 or Dimension 8, stuff like that. And that's just a code word for this is the Final Fantasy it's based off of.
Oh, really? It's that explicit?
Yep. Yeah.
They're all from Dimensions, which is the whole like, oh, is this like just all the Final Fantasies are tied through multi-dimensional things, and these people can travel between the dimensions to these places.
And again, I think the people getting really angry about that when it's very clearly not the first time this has happened. Like, again, the city is a thing. It feels like kind of people looking for a reason to be mad when it's like, you can just ignore this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the first time this has happened.
Yeah, so I guess people don't like that. Like these universes aren't canonically connected, but it's like yes or no, it doesn't really matter because we've already had these crossovers in several other games.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, is every world feature in this game, or is there some left out?
Every mainline Final Fantasy is represented at least once.
1 through 15, then.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess that is
no spin-off games. No Crystal Chronicles level.
Nope.
Final Fantasy Tactics level.
Maybe we'll get some for the DLC because there is a season pass with like 3 DLC packs coming. So maybe we'll get something there.
So let's see. If you were to add a Crystal Chronicles location, what would it be? I don't even know much about the Crystal Chronicles series.
What does post game look like in this game? Unless that's tied to spoilers.
No, it's not really a
spoiler.
Yeah, what does post game look like?
Basically, it unlocks a new chaos difficulty where all the levels are far more difficult, and you can unlock basically level breakers or level limit breakers for all the classes to change the max level for each class from 30 to 55. And then you unlock each level by spending anima crystals. And then each level also has higher tier versions of themselves to allow you to progress up to item level or gear level 300. So it's pretty much replaying the missions to grind gear, to unlock the next level, to grind more gear, to get new job limits raised, and rinse and repeat.
Yeah, because I remember like in the marketing it says that like there were, I don't know if there were already raids or if they're going to add raids later on. Like I was wondering if that content was already in the game. Like how do raids look like in this game?
I mean the boss fights. Yeah, well, some boss fights have like very clear like mechanics to them, so I guess that's maybe what they were kind of going at. I'll be honest, I have not really touched a post game in this because I did get a review copy of a game that I've been working through, and it's like I do want to do the post game because I legitimately have had enough fun with this game that I'm probably going to go for 100% completion. But one thing that's neat that I didn't even realize was a thing, and the game doesn't point out, and maybe you didn't even notice this, Scott. There are hidden side missions that unlock through specific item pickups in certain levels that are hidden. You know how there's like stuff like the Lufenian reports and the Fool's Missives, which are basically just lore like pickups and whatnot. There's some of those where a audio like clip plays, and there's 4 of those, and if you find all of them, there's like side missions attached to that.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
And I do know in like the Neo games, like the post games there would add like new tiers of gear in that game explicitly, like divine and whatever the next one is, exotic, that like have different ways that you upgrade them and have different like itemization in terms of how you incorporate like the abilities. And it actually was kind of fun, but it was often tied to like the very Souls like New Game Plus, or I guess in that game they call it like Way of the Samurai, Way of the Warrior, Way of the whatever they're called. Does this game have a similar thing, or is it just kind of like this chaos difficulty?
Sort of. There are different rarities for equipment. As far as I know, there's nothing like Neo where you can take a specific equipment drop and then level it up, unfortunately, which is kind of a shame. But even before you reach New Game Plus, you can end up finding 5-star equipment, which is like a red equipment drop. And one thing that's actually really neat about equipment, I don't think we talked about, is that specific weapons will sometimes come with like built-in like combo abilities that are exclusive to that weapon, which means that you can add it to your combo chain only when you have that weapon equipped. And some of those are really, really powerful.
Yeah, being able to customize your combo strings is a really, really neat feature in this game.
And one thing that's really cool about it that I don't think a lot of people have brought up, and maybe this is exclusive to the mage weapons, but I do know, like, at least with the mage weapon, the club, that different like combo follow-ups, like, because the way it works is that you can like press, like on Xbox, for example, you can press X a certain amount of times and then you press Y for a finisher. And depending on I changed it to Neo button setup. So normally it would be like R1 into R2. Depending on what you set, those final like finisher attacks can have different elemental properties for mage weapons. So since different enemies have different elemental weaknesses, you can be like, okay, I'm going to finish on this attack if it's this enemy, or this attack if it's this enemy.
And each one will have a different elemental configuration.
Yep.
That seems pretty cool. And like, I guess so mages are more like a hybrid class. I guess I wasn't expecting you to say that the mage weapon is a club.
I really like how mages work, because especially as you go through the job trees, you'll realize that the way that mages work, you can't just like stay away, because you do not passively regenerate MP. You either have to go up and wail on the enemy with your club, which honestly, the club's moveset feels good. It's not like a mage class where it's like it has a melee option, but it's like kind of like a
last resort,
or like a punishment. No, it feels good to wail on an enemy with a club. The way it, like, the impact of the hits feels really nice. The animations look meaty, and then as you deal damage with the club, you'll get MP back. Or one of the other things, and this is something that I really like about how the game as a whole is designed, is that, as I was mentioning earlier, like certain attacks you'll want to soul shield and certain attacks you'll want to dodge. And regardless of if you're playing with a mage or a melee class, your most powerful abilities require MP. And because of that, you're always going to want to either be damaging the enemy or soul shielding, because if you soul shield an attack, you'll gain MP back, even if it's not an attack that you can like copy. So there's a real balance about, like, if you want to be aggressive, you also, if you want to, the game doesn't really let you play super passively, because even if you're defending, you're gaining MP, which you can use towards attacks. And it really incentivizes you to like just get in there and like react to what the boss is doing and just like taking the initiative. And it makes it so that even if you're playing a mage class, you feel really active. And even like when I said like Sage is overpowered, the way that you even get to ultimate, which is the ability that I'm talking about, it's like has this really interesting mechanic where you, every time you use a black magic spell or a white magic spell, you get a sigil of that same color. And the more sigils you have, the faster your casts are. Or like, and when you're maxed out, you'll default to the second tier magic instead of the first tier magic. And then once you have 3 of each, you can cast Ultima for no MP. But like everything combined, the fact that you're like constantly thinking, okay, well, I want to cast 3 of my black magic, 3 of my white magic, and you're trying to get the MP to cast those magics so you can get up to Ultima. Even though I feel like Sage is super overpowered, the way the game's designed really makes it so that you're still engaging with its systems. And like, regardless of all the issues the game has, like, this is probably like one of my favorite like battle systems in an RPG in like forever. It is really fun.
You sound like you're pretty high on it, and you're making me excited to play it. I'm glad that it's not just like selecting magic from a list and saying, well, this is my strongest spell, I'll just spam this because it's the best one I got.
There's a lot of depth and complexity that you can, like in Neo, the more time you put into it, like if you really want to learn a class or kind of a rotation, you can definitely do that with Stranger. And it is a lot of fun. Like I'm super excited. I want to play through the post and do a bunch of post game stuff with friends. Like I want to play this game co-op. Like I'm very excited to really put time into that.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of co-op with friends, and it's been a blast.
That's actually what I wanted to go into, was how the co-op worked. So I saw that Josh was playing it a little bit earlier. I know we've been going on for Stranger a bit now, but maybe this will be the last topic we talk on. Like, how does it feel to play the game in co-op, and how is that set up, Josh?
So basically, if you're the host, you can if you're on the overworld screen and you have like a selectable mission, whether it's a side quest or a main story mission, you can just like open up a room. Like it's like a create a room option. You can select like which mission you want to tackle, and then you can set it up so anyone can join, or it's invite only, or it's like a private session. And then 2 other people, whether it's your friends or just a random person, just joins it. Then you boot up once everyone's ready. You can interact with like the bonfires, like the cubes in the game. and then like as the host, and then it'll like warp everyone back to like where you are upon activation, so everyone's like sticking with each other, and then from there you can do any sort of like job tree stuff, and then at any time you can do like swap out equipment, and like I think like the damage, there's like some damage scaling, so like people aren't like one shotting things left and right if they're like massively over your level. So like everyone still has like still having fun like doing their own contribution to like enemy damage. So it's been fun to just just roam around with friends and beating stuff up. It's fairly simplistic in the way that it's structured, but it doesn't have to be complex, and that's a nice thing about it. And everyone's still benefiting. Like you're still incentivized as like say like a person far ahead to like help out like your underleveled buddies, because you're still getting anima shards out of it, which is still a valuable resource for you to continue leveling up your jobs and so forth. So you still feel like you're still getting rewarded out of it, even though you don't necessarily care about like low level equipment. You care about the anima shards. You always do. So that's been a lot of fun. As if you're on the other side, if you're not the host, so you're not playing Jack, you're playing the other party members that the host has assigned. So if they have like Ash and Neon as their other party members, depending on when you join, you're either Ash or Neon or that host, and then you still have like your equipment effects on you and everything, but like it's not represented through like the outward appearance of that character. The outward appearance is whatever the host has set as the outward appearance for that character. But as for your equipment, all those effects still apply.
So you're playing as whatever class you want to play as, occupying like the physical space of Neon or Ash or whoever. That seems kind of cool.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, even though I do like the idea of having like 3 different classes of Jack running around.
Yeah.
Like
that's the only other like small bummer is like your finishers as the other character are very, very like basic standard animation finishers, while Jack has like the crazy over the top soul burst finishers, which I really love, because a lot of them are just like so disrespectful and irreverent to Final Fantasy creatures.
Yeah.
So violent.
Yeah.
He does like a backbreaker finish on us like a Sahagin, and I'm like, oh my god.
My favorite one is with the Tonberries, where he just goes up to them and he just like puts his hand on their head, and then you just see them start vibrating, and then crystals just burst out of every orifice, and it's like, oh
yeah. It's crazy. Like every finisher Jack has, like especially to the bosses, it's like it's so over the top and disrespectful.
Josh, have you seen the zombie dragon one yet?
Yes, I've seen the zombie dragon. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, just 10 out of 10.
My favorite is the boss fight where Jack just throws the dude's horse at him and the horse explodes.
Oh yeah, yep. The Dark Knight one.
Yep, that's my favorite one. Just screw it, I'm just gonna chuck your horse at you.
I wasn't expecting to hear someone battle finisher about a horse being chucked across the room and then subsequently exploding, but that seems very in line with what this game is selling itself as.
Yeah, it's funny in multiplayer because like you'll have like 2 boss phases, and then like those phase changes happen roughly around like the halfway mark of a boss fight, but like Jack has to be the one to like do like the initiator for that second phase. So I always call it as Jack time when it has to be done. It's like, all right, it's Jack time.
Well, we'll likely wrap around to Final Fantasy Origin Stranger of Paradise. I know I said that backwards next week, as maybe more of us get further into the game or start playing it. But it was really awesome to have Scott on to talk about it. And I do also want to point out that, like I did earlier, that he did write the review for it up on the site. So if you want to see his opinions in written form, we do have that up. I believe it is the top cover of the site right now. Yep. So go ahead and give that a read if you're inclined. Though we will likely be revisiting discussion on that game in subsequent podcasts, at least one. Maybe we'll talk about our favorite boss fights or our favorite arenas, our favorite locations inspired by the other games.
That's Jack time.
And then there is another release that is coming out shortly in this week, I believe, in the next couple days, that we've talked about in the podcast previously. and that is the upcoming strategy mecha RPG Relayer. So I do believe that Josh has had his hands on the full version of this game after having touched the, I don't know if it was a preview or a demo.
Yeah, it's a demo that's like a public demo that people can try out, and then all that saved data can transfer over to the full game.
So I'll just hand it off to you, Josh. And now that you've been having your hands on the full game of Relayer, you've already kind of established like some of the groundwork about how the game plays and feels. But just now that you've been able to experience the full game, just what are your thoughts so far, and whether or not you want to make sure that people are, that this game, March has been a packed month completely, and I don't want this game to like just fall under the radar or through the cracks. So just tell us about your time with Relayer.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't. Like, I have spent like about 60 hours with the game, and just finally beat the main story just a little bit early, yesterday, as of the time of this recording. And honestly, I kind of dig it. I'm surprised by how much I really liked it. Just for people who forgot, like the basic story setup is that you're controlling this group known as the Star Children against like these extraterrestrial life forms called the Relayers, and the Relayers are trying to like gain control of the universe and destroy it, because it's kind of like they're in their nature to do so. And so I guess it's a weird comparison. Like, I don't know if anyone has seen, like, I guess it's more akin to like Gundam, either the original Gundam or Gundam Seed, but in terms of like new types and or coordinators, where like they're like this is like an evolved form of human that's like very attuned with space. And the Star
I've only seen the Gundam 00 movie.
Don't worry, I'm a Gundam expert as well.
It's okay. So Chai kind of gets it. Yeah, okay, and Scott kind of gets it. So
we're a bunch of Gundam nerds in here, except me.
So the Star Children are this group where they inherit the will of the stars. So essentially, they have like a personified voice in their head that is supposedly like the star's voice. And they're kind of imbued with like, hey, I entrusted my will to you to like protect like the solar system and the universe from these relayers. So that's why a lot of the characters in this game are named after a star or a planet, or planets or stars. So you'll have like Mercury, Venus, Terra, just obviously Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, etc. And they do count Pluto in here. I don't know if they count Pluto as a planet, but definitely a significant start to have its own representative. So Pluto represents.
I feel like I'm being very nitpicky, but those aren't stars.
What the heck?
Those are planets.
So they're Sailor Scouts with giant robots.
Okay. And they're all Star Children. Okay.
And then you'll have like other stuff like the star of Sirius and the three moons are the three stars of Orion. Mintaka, Ainulem, and
all right. So there are stars. I take it back.
Yeah, so they're definitely, the scope is there, and then so throughout the game you're meeting them, and the cool thing about this game is that it's like the first like chunk of the game is constantly like in conflict with one another. Like there's a lot of like uneasy alliances and like factions being divided because the initial group of Star Children that you have like aboard this spaceship called the Asterism. Like there's only a few of them you meet early on, and then as you go throughout the game, you'll see that there are other factions throughout this world and this galaxy, where like they're serving different factions and different organizations, all with their own like agendas. Like say for example, like even within the Earth faction, like these Star Children are supposed to help humanity fend off the Relayers, but even within that like faction, there are already like some split ones where like there's like a faction of the Earth faction or the humanity faction where they don't trust Star Children. Like humans are supposed to be able to forge their own destiny. We don't want to like rely on like humans or like rely on Star Children to be the ones to like guide humanity. Like they just like inherently distrust them because they're like kind of like almost the chosen ones, and like why should we rely on them for this? So if you remember, for people who like Chow here who watch Gundam Seed, they're kind of like that Earth organization where you remember the three druggies in that anime?
Yeah, the Earth Alliance. There was the Earth Alliance. There was SAF and there was Orb.
Yeah,
That was basically
So you kind of have like an Earth Alliance like equivalent in this game where they kind of like manufacture like their own pilots to kind of get the same performance as the Star Children, because Star Children are like really good pilots. So like this faction, for example, like do like really really bad stuff behind the scenes to kind of get up to speed with enhanced humans, to represent and pilot for them. And it's like, all right, but so like you'll have a lot of like cool like opposition in that end where like there'll be like some story segments are like, oh, that's weird. I'm like controlling like for some instance, like I'm controlling like characters that I just barely faced off against because like this plot like is centered around them and they have like bigger threats. So like you're not just confined to like your core group. Sometimes you'll go off and like play the other faction in some instances or a different faction on where the story goes. And the whole like groundwork of this like very early on is like the main character's name is Terra. Terra lost her sister at this gravity loss incident on Earth where the gravity all of a sudden stopped working at a section on Earth, and her sister like flew off into space and she couldn't hold her hand, so she presumes like the sister is dead. I'm kind of going a little bit over like what I've talked about previously, but just like get people up to speed. And ever since that incident, she lost all her memories of who she was before that incident occurred. So she's kind of been living life, easygoing, like on the moon, early on, and then until like a relayer attack happens, and she kind of gets scouted by the asterism, to go fend off the threat and any other threat that goes against them. And the thing that caught me off guard about this game is like when I was playing the demo that encompasses like the first few hours of the game, like for the first 3 to 4 hours or so, I was like, I don't know, this game feels very generic and like by the books, and and I've already mentioned earlier on and in social media of like it's very front loaded with like its typos as well in the English script, where you'll just have all sorts of like misspelled words, capitalizations where they're not supposed to be where they're at, and like the whole stiff dry translation of the script was like things are just like being laid out, but like not in a very very straightforward dull fashion. And it's like I don't know if I really dig this. But as I kept playing through the game, and like I want to say after the end of chapter 2, like it was starting to go like in a really interesting direction where like more of these like segmented factions were all interfacing with another, and like there are actual like real like significant relationships with like cast members in between these factions. Like, oh, why are you in the opposition? Like, what's happening? Like early on, one of the things that you learn is that Terra's sister is alive, but she's for some reason siding with the relayers. It's like, what's that all about? So it's kind of like a tragic reunion of like a sister that she thought like that she lost, and now she's working for the enemy of mankind.
Sounds like there's all the mecha tropes all through it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds pretty tropey, but
it is very mecha anime Gundam tropey. Like, but the way they handle it, the way they lay it out, is very like oddly endearing, because as you play the game and you kind of build like you get to know more about these characters and the way they interact, it's like you kind of start falling in like not in love with the characters, but like I started really digging like the ensemble as a whole, because they're very good about like kind of livening up each other and learning more about the characters as they as the story goes on. Like because the characters like backgrounds are like so weirdly interesting. Like one of the characters that you meet early on, Uranus, she's like a black market doctor almost, and she's like riddled with debt because of experimentation she's done on like previous patients. And it's like, what the fuck is that all about? But she's on your side because she's a star child.
Time to use the meme. I'm a doctor, but pulls a gun.
Yeah, and so I like it's one of those things that's like it's hard to really talk about exactly what I like about it, because like a lot of that is like filled in spoilers, and I kind of want people to see that for themselves, because there are some like moments of, like it's so weird because like this game is like the English script is so weirdly all over the place because after like the demo content where it ends, the amount of typos I saw in the script like drastically dropped off. So it's like it's kind of weirdly competent from then on with the occasional typo here and there, and like and a good chunk of it is like still that stiff dry translation. But then there are other like later characters where they're very lively and like the script reflects that, and then like the way they interact with characters and how some conversations laid out, I was like, oh my, like I'm actually laughing at like what's going on because like it's a pretty amusing what's going on with like how these developments and how where these characters end up as time goes on, because the state of the game really evolves over time, and that's the only way I can decent way I can put that because of how these characters kind of evolve. And
sounds like the demo left a very bad impression. That's my take.
Yeah, it's like it's a really bad first impression. Like I agree, and like for people who played the English stuff have a more sour taste of it because like I switched on the English dub on it for like a little bit, and like a lot of the line readings in English are like sadly very like monotone almost. It's very like it sounds like they're clearly reading like just from the script, but like not really, being very energetic about it. Not to say that like that reflects throughout every character, but like from the slices that of it that I got, I'm like I'm not really digging it. And like I've heard people who played the demo in English, it's like I'm not really digging the English dub. So and like it's weird because there are definitely some characters in the like voice actors credits that are very noteworthy. I don't know if I can actually reveal who they are yet because obviously they do so for
but it's not a cast of nobodies.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if it's like a voice direction type of thing or what the constraints were in that end, but the Japanese like audio for this game like is really good. Like I really like the voice actors and their work on this game for that because they're very lively and energetic in that aspect. For the gameplay itself, it's I mentioned it's a mecha strategy RPG. It's as I mentioned before, it brings a kind of like a new flavor of that. It's not like Super Robot Wars or G Generation, not even like triangle strategy or maybe a tiny bit of Fire Emblem, a tiny bit. But in this game, everyone is assigned like 4 roles: an assaulter, which is a melee DPS; sniper, which is range DPS; tank, which is obviously tank; and scout, which is like your support or healer class. So this plays around with Holy Trinity a lot. And as you progress through the game, like one of my like complaints about it is like the difficulty curve gets really, really stark, especially if you're not grinding. I did hardly any grinding as I played the game. Like I got to like the level 30 limit in the demo, but that falls off really quick as you're following through the main story, and then you'll have like before you go to the main story segment, it'll say recommended level, and then by the end of the game, I was like maybe like 50 to 20 levels behind like the recommended level, and I was just like playing through the game normally, trying to keep like my people like within the same like level range. Not like I never had like a squad because throughout the game like the pilots that you'll be using constantly changes.
I actually enjoy that.
Yeah, and like there are definitely some like plot segments where like they force deploy you into like story centric characters, into like where characters that are like important to like that's like the constant like the current plot line. So like you never want anyone to like feel like to fall too behind on levels because of that. So it gets pretty challenging, and they do have like battle simulator missions where like you can like grind like story stages that you previously beaten, and they're like the exact same stage. Like there's nothing new about them. It's just like, hey, you can like redo the stage, except like there'll be like a little bit higher level enemies, and then you can grind off of them. I'm like, that could appeal to someone. I'm not really big into like, oh, go grind here on the stage that you already did. So I just went through it normally, and then like it's oddly, aside from the final boss, it's oddly really refreshing on how challenging like it gets when it's like when your back is against the wall and you're like, okay, I really have to think about like enemy aggro ranges and managing like aggro values on my characters. Every character has like an aggro value assigned to them, and the higher that aggro value is, the more likely they're to be targeted by the enemy. So obviously tanks will have a lot of skills that spec into like, hey, I'll raise my aggro value and maybe I'll raise my defense or attack, or maybe I'll take away aggro value from a nearby party member and and kind of absorb their aggro value into my own. And so you're really playing around with enemy like AI management of just like, okay, make sure you target the tank because they're the ones to be able to take the hits when it matters the most, while all the other characters need to like make sure to do their part on supporting that tank and taking out the threat. And the way this manifests in combat is there are two different sorts of like attack categories. Like you'll have like either a weapon that does physical damage or a weapon that does gravity damage. So that'll be represented by like icons on them. So aside from like their class, which is like say a tank has a sword, or a support has like bits like from Gundam, like funnels, or like great sword users, or I mean melee DPS users like two-handed great swords. Like aside from that icon, they'll either be in yellow or in purple, and then that'll signify yellow is physical, purple is gravity, and then units that have a certain category, they do more damage to the opposite category. So physical does more damage to gravity, and vice versa. So you're strategizing of like which units you want to use to take out certain threats, and obviously bonus damage is bonus damage on top of that. So yeah, so it's a really interesting like management of like pushing your own line, like enemy lines, like towards you, and making sure that like you're peeling just enough and not the whole entire squad, because you can get easily overwhelmed if everyone acts on you. So that's why this is very meticulous, like almost puzzle game of like, okay, I want to engage this squad first while making sure that like it doesn't like aggro that other squad over there. So because like it gets pretty tense, because the enemies can easily like two-shot like your party members like on a bad hit. Like, oh, they're targeting like a support or a healer, they like one-shot or two-shot them because you mispositioned.
Is there any punishment for losing your units in battle?
No, there's no permadeath. There's no sort of like penalty. It's like you just can't use them for the rest of the battle, and so you know that's fine. So that's pretty engaging in its own way, and I really do enjoy that. I also enjoyed that it's not a lot of maps, but it does somewhat have like better level design in some parts than the Super Robot Wars series, especially recently, because a lot of maps in modern SRW games these days have like very big flat open maps, and it's like where anyone can really go anywhere, but like no, and like terrain like means very little. And it's like yeah, it's fun, but it's not really engaging with like the level design in itself. While in this game there'll be some stage where there's actually obstacles on the field, so there'll be like walls and like fences or barriers, and you have to think about how do you like maneuver your squad and enemies in this like kind of crowded field. Like you'll be think about like choke point, like potential choke points, or like where can I funnel them into, or there'll be like some levels where you'll have two squads that are like separate from each other, and like and then they're separated by like a obstacle in the field, and then you have to like kind of think about their two different compositions and how you want to interact with enemies that they both have to deal with separately. So it does play around with that as well, and that's really cool. As for like your composition and your classes, this game does have a job system, where it's pretty cool how they present this at first, like on its like on the surface, but it is a fucking nightmare to navigate. So how they visualize this is every character has like this base tree that can branch off into two paths, and they like you'll see like the icon for say like shinobi, or for like a spell like a wiseman, or where like say like shinobi has like the shuriken icon for it. So when you go switch into shinobi, like your nodes are presented through constellations, but they take the shape of that class. So you'll see like a constellation that looks like a shuriken, and it looks really cool. Like, okay, that's a pretty neat way to like go about this, because it's very astrology theme. very centered about the stars. So obviously, it makes sense. But the way they present this in English, when you're trying to like get a lay of like, okay, what are like the nodes on this tree? Like the text gets very, very crowded to the point that like you don't know sometimes which scales correspond with which node until you actually hover over that node. So that at a glance view feels very disruptive and chaotic because like there's just so much text going on and you don't know which text corresponds with which node at a certain point. And then there'll be some times in that like text parsing where like you'll have text overlap with another text, so you don't even see like the full skill name because it's overlapping with text from another skill that's nearby. So it's just like and then the way you control it is with the left analog stick, you can only follow the lines of that constellation. And so you kind of get a sense of like, okay, this is where things connect with one another. And it's because sometimes it's not very clear about like where lines lead to on certain nodes. So you'll be following like a constellation line, and like it'll be overlapping with like 3 other intersections of that line. But it's only progressing linearly towards a path. It's not branching out into another path. But the way that looks on its face is like, oh, it's intersecting with this line. I thought I could go to this setup. So that gets really weird and confusing. And if you want to like go see like a future node on like what it does, and you don't want to follow that constellation line because it's far off, so you have to use like the right analog stick to like enable like a free cursor,
and then like manually trace it.
Yeah, and like so you go to that free cursor and then you hover over that node and you try to, and then it's so finicky because like sometimes you won't be able to like get it precisely on where it is. So like you have to use like the left analog stick again to like snap it back into place into the nearest like line it can find. So and hopefully it'll snap into like the node that like you're trying to like hover over to see what it does. So it gets there's a lot of like quality of life things. I hope they like clean up like either in a later patch or like in maybe a future installment or whatnot. And because that thing is cool the way they present it, but the way you navigate it it's not good. And then so the way you interact with like branching jobs is say you're like I'll take the melee DPS class for example, like the assaulter. So you fill out this constellation node. There's like maybe like let's say 30 nodes on it, and then you fill out all the nodes, and then on the final node, it'll give you a decision called the Grand Crossroads. And the Grand Crossroads says that you can only spec into one of these 2 paths, and once you make your decision, you can't go back. There's no respec option. You can only either go be the Vanguard Braver class or the Shinobi into Ninja path. And the Vanguard Braver is your typical melee DPS that's up on front in the front line that can increase their attack power, and they're pretty easy to learn. Or you can go down like the path of the Shinobi, where they spec more into like the decreasing aggro on them, being more stealthy around the battlefield because the enemies are not paying attention to their low aggro values, and their evasion is their main source of like they don't want to take damage. They want to try to avoid it altogether, and they specialize in backstab damage and so forth. So you have that end of the spectrum, and then once you spec into one, you can't go to the other. But you get so many party members that have like the same base class where you can like spec them into different classes. So say I have Terra, and I put her to Shinobi Ninja. Like that doesn't mean I'll never get to see like what Vanguard Braver does, because eventually you'll get someone else who's an assaulter, and then you can spec them to Vanguard Braver and see what that tree has, And although
that seems like a good compromise between like I don't like when like for instance 3 houses. I actually kind of don't like that you can make anyone any class in that game.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like having some sort of rigidity in saying like maybe a certain unit can be a family of classes, or even hell, this unit is a sword master. That's all they are. Deal with it. Make use of it how you will. I kind of like having a little bit more structure like that, because then it feels more like a chessboard. So it seems like it's a good compromise to basically saying like you can only pick one of these. However, we make sure that you have enough of a roster that you're not locking yourself out of ever seeing that class just for this unit. Like whatever, however you've been using this unit, they're going to be a Shinobi Ninja or a Vanguard, whatever the other one was. And therefore you have to make. There needs to be some sort of like decision with consequences rather than just being like, oh, I didn't like that, I'm going to redo it. I don't know. I like having some sort of. You can't go too far because you don't want to be like inconvenient, but. Yeah,
and like the neat thing is like even though like say both like you have two DPS melee DPS classes and they both spec into Shinobi Ninja, like sure they'll share a lot of skills, but there are some like specific nodes that are like character exclusive. Like Terra has like skill like heal skills that are exclusive to her, where she can heal herself and like buff herself in the process, while another character might be a melee DPS class that takes Shinobi Ninja, but then they have specific character nodes that like focus on like debuffing like an enemy because that's just like inherent to their character. Like for example, for supporters, every supporter like the support class, like the heal debuffer buffer class, like they all have the option to deploy a decoy, and the decoy is it has a lot of aggro value, and obviously it's kind of like uses sort of a scapegoat. So like if you need to really get that like safe initiate on like an enemy group, you can have them all target the decoy at first, and then so you're kind of like plucking them off as they're focused on the decoy. It's pretty weak. It can't attack and it doesn't have much hit points, but it's just there to serve as a brief distraction, so you can like get them into like a safe range and like try like initiate farther from the enemy group. Like you still might have to like enter like a zone where it'll like aggro like the other like enemy group, but they won't have like a advantageous position from the get go. So all of the supporters can deploy a decoy, but only one character has like a specific like build where they can like enhance the decoy. They can deploy a super decoy that's like golden and has like a lot more hit points and aggro value when it comes out, and like when it gets defeated by an enemy, it has this person has the option to like make it so when the decoy explodes, enemy nearby characters get like take damage, get a status debuff, and then you can actually augment like the range of that at a certain point too. So there are definitely specializations that a character can engage with, so you're more informed about like, okay, this character has a quirk about them that makes them like almost invaluable. Like the Mercury, one of the supporters earlier on, has like the exclusive skill of just like casting like a heal skill that'll encompass the whole map, and it'll do like a good heal on like all your characters, but it gives her a shitload of aggro value because she did that, and that costs that doesn't cost mana because everyone has like an SP bar, like a mana bar. That costs like a certain amount of special gauge in the mission. So when you deploy on a mission, you have like this gauge that you fill up by basically doing anything, taking damage, dealing damage, buffing yourself, buffing others, debuffing. Like this gauge will gradually decrease over time. It has like 5 like storages, like kind of like a Metroid health bar, where like you'll have like 5 pips of it at maximum, and like that spell, that healing range spell, costs 2 of those pips, while other like ones are other ultimate abilities like big like AoE abilities will cost like 3, and so you're managing like resources, valuable resources in the midst of battle as well. So there's a good chunk of strategy and depth and customization in that. It's not like the most elegant way to present it, but it's good enough. You do have like a basic weapon upgrade system in this game too, where you'll have, as you progress to the story, you have like a shop that consistently gets like better equipment for armor and weapons, and then they're all depicted like a star rating, all depicted by a star rating, and then you can like upgrade them like with in-game money that you earn. And the weird thing about this weapon upgrade system is like it has like one little nitpick that's like really annoying about it, where like the menuing in this game is already not great, and every time you unlock a new tier of weapons, and you'll have like say like 9 or 10 party members, and you want to equip them all with like all this new equipment. You'll have to like manually go through and equip like all of them with all this gear, and then if you want to upgrade them and you have the resources to spare to upgrade them, the way you go about it is very annoying. It's like one by one. You can't like do mass upgrading because when you upgrade a weapon, you can go to +1, +2, +3, and then like turn into an all new weapon that has like it's like kind of like an upgraded version of that weapon. But anytime during these upgrades, there's an RNG chance for it to turn into dark side. It'll be like a dark side upgrade where it'll turn that weapon like pitch black and like it looks ominous, and like it does it like the stats you get from it are pretty significant, but to offset that, you take damage every time that character gets a turn. Like they're just self-inflicted with the a status ailment.
So the typical like cursed weapon,
yeah, pretty much,
or whatever.
And of course you can just like save scum. That's like, okay, I don't want this weapon upgrade because I was want like good stats, but I don't want that
trade-off
status ailment. Yeah, so you can obviously save scum that, but then if you want to do that, you have to spend a substantial amount of time, like say doing it for these 10 characters, and you're upgrading the weapons one by one by one. And then at any time, it could go RNG into that. And it's like, okay, well, I don't want that. So it becomes an ordeal once you get like a good chunk of the roster and a new tier of weapons and armor upgrades come out. And then you have to spend like about an hour and a half, like kind of getting them all up to spec and speed on
and making sure to save to avoid that.
Yeah. And it's not. Yeah, it's. I think it would just get rid of that system entirely, of that RNG into cursed weapon, because it doesn't really serve you at all. I can't think of from where I stand. I can't think of any sort of reason anyone would want to do that. But you know, maybe someone will find something. But who knows? Like. I think the weird thing I wanted to like mention before we move on, aside from one, the final boss being fucking absolute dog shit, bullshit, and garbage. Like I'm not gonna spoil like the setup for the final boss, but the way it is presented is annoying, because like bosses in this game are like, the boss variety in this game is very disappointing, because like the boss units are all basically like the same model and like have the same animations, so it's kind of like whatever. They're annoying. They have AoE attacks that do a lot of damage, but then like the final boss is like just a bigger one of those, like more gigantic one of those, and like has like different parts you have to like get rid of because they do buffs and debuffs. But then its core unit has like a massive AoE that like can easily like just like it like from my average levels were around like level 1, like I'd say like a level 105 is like my average level at that final boss fight, and then like the recommended level is like level 125 or something, and like it just like that AoE attack could just like one shot like most of my units that I was deploying, so it became a very very all or nothing battle after like hours of experimentation on like what will trigger that AoE attack, and it was really annoying. But then after you beat the game, it's like a sadly bittersweet, sad ending. It's like, oh man, this feels like, yes, for now, like we've overcome our difficulties, but like, what was the cost of all that? And like, there are definitely some things that happen at the end, and like, and that affects certain characters to do what they do. Like after the ending, it's like, okay, well, and then I'm wondering, okay, well, what's the post game? Because there's still like a question mark at the menu screen, like, and then that unlocks in post game, and then that post game is like, it's like called Asterism Voyage, and it's basically like a big alternate what if scenario of like, what if the ending of the game, like the events that happen at the end of the game didn't happen, what would happen then? And then it's like another additional 30 plus stages, all with story scenes on this big what if scenario. And it's like, what? This just like that was like a bittersweet sad ending, and then like now this is like a weird post game that says, what if that didn't happen? What if it's just like it was still happy go lucky times? Like what?
They're trying to sell you the good ending as a DLC, okay?
Well, it's not DLC. This is
know, but you get what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
it's kind of like robbing like the emotional impact of that ending into like, I don't know, like
there's a game that I was thinking that was guilty of this. It's like the Lufia 2 remake on the DS, where you know, the game has a very sad ending in the original game. It's not really a spoiler because if you play the original, it already spoils the ending from that game, right? And if you beat the game once, you can do a new game plus, and you can get the happy ending where it's like, what? But that loses all the emotional impact, though.
Yeah, so that is a weird one. Like, and like that, like I dabbled with this post game for a bit, and like there's definitely like places you've never visited in the main game that like just like open up to you there as well. So it's like, okay, that's weird. So, you know, like, but it does say, hey, congratulations, you beat the game. Now onto this what if scenario. It's just like, okay, well, and you know, but I think the strength of this game, that I hope, you know, hopefully more people get around to playing it, is like, I think it's the characters and their interactions and seeing how they grow. I think it's I was very impressed that, like, okay, this is actually a really cool cast of characters, and I think every single person will have their own different favorite character because there's a lot of characters and they're all cool in their own ways, and I think they're just really there's something really that's what I want to see out of a new IP. You know, like I think hopefully they make more of these relayer games that go off of like the canonical ending, not this weird what if scenario. And there's, you know, a lot of room for improvement, but I'm really like, there's definitely ways to like continue the story with what happens at the end of the game. Because it's not like it's, yeah, I won't say more about that, but it's really cool to see, like, hey, they introduced this whole new role, this whole new universe, this whole new cast, and like, and they've done them justice for the scope of this game, and it does feel like a voyage. Like it is a meaty game, like but it never really overstays like its welcome when it comes to these characters. There's never like a time where like, oh, I'm getting bored of this cast. It's and that's what I want to see out of a new IP. Like, I think this is a really solid foundation for hopefully more of these games, and there are definitely flaws in it, no doubt, but you know, that's something that future iterations can fix and improve upon.
So Relayer releases on March 24th, so next week as of the time of this recording. So,
but buy the super expensive edition for early access. I think it has one of those as well.
And it's been cool that we've had a few opportunities to talk about it, both with the public preview as well as you were able to get access to the full game ahead of time. I'll jump ahead to like a news bit from later. Relayer will get a physical release set for May 20th through specific vendors depending on your region. In Europe, this is Red Art Games, and in North America, I guess it's from Video Games Plus. So that'll be from for May 20th for those that want a physical edition of the game. The March release is for digital versions on just on PSN.
Yeah, that's really surprising and really cool that it's going to get a physical release, even though it's not day and date. That this is going to be like the first, you know, this is the first time that Clouded Leopard Entertainment's like embarking on this endeavor and trying to make this, you know, as big as it can be.
They want to prove that they're right to license Kuro, okay?
There's a lot of barriers to that.
So we've been talking about Stranger of Paradise and Relayer as our games talk section for this week. I won't spend a lot of time on it, just a couple minutes, but I did start Triangle Strategy. Obviously, that just released early in the month, and some of us are still working through it. We've had opportunity to talk about Triangle Strategy, mostly as Josh has been able to play through it and reference through Cullen's review of the game up on the site. So I'm only a few chapters in, and I don't have a ton of like opinions on the story and how it plays out because I haven't seen much of the branching paths or whatever. But I do have just two comments that I just wanted to bring up, I suppose. And one of them is, even playing on normal for Triangle Strategy, I have enjoyed how challenging it is. It's not brainless, and there's a difficulty above where I'm at too. So that is one thing I've kind of really enjoyed, is that it's not just a cakewalk. I do have to consider like who my units are and what the objective is. But one thing that has really taken me out of the game, and is probably like sadly a reason I haven't gotten any further, is that I really don't like the scales of conviction mechanic, just narratively. I just think it's really awkward. It takes me completely out of the moment, where it's like the very first major decision is basically like, what boat will you go on? Will you go to nation A or nation B? And like, to me, it just feels like, okay, just make this a choice in the game that you make. But instead, it has to bespokely say like, go fetch the scales of conviction, and we'll pull it out to this bridge we're waiting on. And everyone, grab your choice coin, and we're going to like do this properly, and we're going to make the choice. And to me, it just feels like, couldn't this? I guess there's some admiration for making it like a narrative thing as well. Like, this is why the choice.
Like it's serving as like as an excuse for the tutorial of that mechanic.
Yeah, but it just seems like, why don't they just say like, you make a choice? And they also like explicitly say like, well, don't worry about it. The other lord from the other region, I forget what it's called. Like, I'll just go to the place you decide not to. Like, oh, that's convenient. Like, we're going to send one person each way, but you get to use your fancy mechanic, and I'll just go to whatever is left. So that way we're covered. Don't worry about it.
Just for breakfast. Go fetch the seals of conviction.
And it just takes me completely. Go ahead, Scott.
Pancakes or waffles.
Oh,
quick.
yeah.
Oh, shit. Yeah, you're going to need the skills of conviction for that one.
And
we're going to need everyone to weigh in on this.
Well, they did say it's a family heirloom, and usually the best outcome comes from the scales, so you could use that as an excuse, maybe.
And I agree with Brian, though. For sure.
It also seems like there's a little bit of incongruity. First of all, I feel like I'm bagging on the game. I'm really enjoying it just as a good strategy game in terms of like how the game plays. But just this one thing has really just bugged me. And then as a kind of related thing, early in the game, they're like, House Wolford, thank goodness they were here to mediate the discussions, because they have like this decision-making apparatus or whatever. But also then later in like other contexts, they're like, well, we're just a bunch of soldiers, that's our role, is that we're just a bulwark for the nation. Like, they don't quite seem to align on like what, like, House Wolford is the second strongest house of the nation, and what is their role? Are they like, strategists and mediators, or are they just like soldiers that only know how to swing a sword? And it doesn't quite seem to align on like where they want to fall on that. So I thought that
family, okay.
They sort of go into that, but like, never as much in detail as you want about like what are the exact strengths of that family, besides like just a general jack of all trades. Like, they're pretty good strategists and pretty good battlefield people, but they never really commit to one.
Yeah, so I'm not very far. I'm planning to like play through this. Basically, like we've mentioned, there's a lot of games in March, and we just went through 2 more in our big long section early on. And I'm kind of like looking ahead to April and being like, thank goodness. Like, obviously, there's the Chrono Cross remaster that I'm interested in, but other than that, April and May seem a bit like, there's obviously a bunch of good releases still, but a little bit lighter relative to March and even February. So I'm kind of like, all right, over the next month, we'll be able to have some more time with more people getting to Triangle Strategy or Stranger Paradise.
It's weird. Like, I'm thinking about it, and like, I think Stranger Paradise, like, maybe the first game this year that I can actually play and beat like in under 25 hours, because all the other games I played this year have been like at least 40-hour endeavors at the very least.
Pretty much.
Well, with that,
I'm gonna be anxious to see real quick. I'm just kind of on Josh's point. Is like, I'm gonna be really curious to see what all they add with the Stranger of Paradise DLC. Very intrigued.
I didn't get the deluxe version, but if it seems good, then maybe I'll pick up like that additional content. I have no idea. They kind of give like a brief preview of like what they're called, but not exactly what they'll have.
Well, with that, we'll go into the news section of the podcast. So actually, before I do that, sorry, a couple more things that I want to call out on the website. We did mention Scott's review for Stranger of Paradise, obviously. We did get 2 more reviews up on the site this week. One of which is ChocoboGP, which we've kind of discussed the monetization practices and the weird like full release, I don't know, contradiction that game has. And that obviously is a kind of a big center point of the review. The review was written by Cullen. So it's up on the site, talking about how he is trying to enjoy the game. He thinks it controls really well, has some nitpicks on the game front in terms of like how many characters you start out with and how many you have to unlock. He feels like it felt a little bit limited and uneven. I believe you only start with 3. and you have to unlock the rest. Many of which you unlock through story, which is fine, but then also the usual discussion about the battle pass and the paid monetization and all those things that kind of really soured his impression on the game. So he was playing the Switch version of the game, full $40 release.
There's only a Switch version.
Oh, I thought there was a mobile version.
No.
Oh, never mind. He played the only version of the game. And so you can read up his sites on his review, his thoughts on his review up on the site. And then also we got a review for a February release that might have fallen under the radar because it came out within days of Elden Ring. And that is Atelier Sophie 2, Alchemist of the Mysterious Dream. So Paige wrote this review for us. She also wrote the preview a few months ago. So just kind of her final thoughts on that game. I haven't read through the review myself, so I can't summarize it. But another game that came out in February that maybe if people haven't had a chance to make time for it, maybe April and May will ease up and allow us to make room for that. But she thought pretty highly of it, and her full thoughts are up on the site. We were able to skip talking about Elden Ring deliberately for 1 week. But now this week, we're going to talk about it again because there was a fairly major update in the form of patch 1.03. Now, normally, we wouldn't spend a ton of time talking about individual patches for specific games. That's just a little bit too in the weeds, and you can always read those notes on whatever service they're delivered on through the game forums or Twitter or however. However, Elden Ring patch 1.03 is a bit interesting because it takes some pretty big swings into some aspects of the game that some people applauded, and then some people actually thought that this was really quite needed. A lot of the patch is balancing of enemies and weapons and skills and summons and all those things. Rip Mimic Tear, who carried me through some of the later game bosses because I wasn't able to beat them solo.
Mimic Tear is still good. I mean, it's not as insane, but it's still okay. Like people will still use it. The nerfs to it aren't as soul crushing as one may lead you to believe.
Isn't the biggest change is that if you talk to an NPC, now they're marked in the map no matter where they are.
And that's actually what I was going to get to. And I remember talking about it on this podcast where I said, I was trying to follow some side quests, but then an NPC would just leave and I wasn't sure where to find them. I'm thinking of a side quest where you give the golden needle to the woman that you meet in the damaged monastery. And I wasn't sure, okay, I did that part of the quest. Where do I find her now? And then I just never did. But now, basically just as in terms of a player convenience quality of life, once you meet an NPC for the first time, their name will show up on the map when you highlight over a nearby site of grace, showing you where that NPC currently resides. There was a similar one where the I forget his name, but the faith priest from the hub area ends up going out to find Gold Mask, and I wasn't ever sure where to find him. And then eventually it's of course, he's along the road here near this site of grace. But if you had already explored that area, you might not have had reason to go back there. So you just might not happen to find him, which to me, I was kind of okay with that. It's just kind of part of that emergent storytelling. I just happened never to follow up on this because that wasn't the way that I progressed through the game. And I'm okay with that. But obviously there's usually some cool stories and often some good treasure and some spells and things like that behind these side quests. So people have been applauding just having this little thing where it seems like a good compromise where once you meet a character for the first time, you're able to keep track of where they are at and what they're doing. But some people have said that this is... Go ahead.
This one is weird because this is not a new feature to the game. This feature was already in the network test for this game, and people...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and a lot of people were very confused, including me. It was I thought the network test had NPCs on here, and sure enough, it's one of those. It's they had a release candidate that didn't have that feature. And then they at least finally got it sorted out. Maybe a little bit too late for some people like me, but it's fine.
Yeah, because I don't even know where to find patches anymore. I went and found him, and he's like, "Oh, you can come and find me over here." And now I don't know where he is anymore.
Should have kept written notes. Should have had your notebook by you. But even in some cases, I'm near positive that for some of these NPCs, the priest from the hub and I'm bad with names. So many names in this game are very similar, like Michaela and Melania and Godfrey and Godfrey.
They all have they all have the initials GRM.
Apparently,
that's just like the offer.
But it's interesting to see like even beyond like balance changes, they made changes like some of the bosses like Radon, for example, like they reduce his hitboxes to like by 40%, which is like insane to think about. It's like, yeah, it did have a lot of weird fucking hitboxes for a lot of its attacks, huh?
I don't think they should have nerfed him. It's a lot of people that are exploring it everywhere they shouldn't be going yet, and they're getting wiped because of it.
Well, you know, it's fine. Like, you know, they from what I understand, a lot of like the later game bosses were untouched. So, you know, the challenge is still there.
The later boss deserves to be nerfed. There's a few people that are like literally.
Malenia definitely needs to be nerfed. She's unfair.
Nah, keep her as she's great. She's great.
They did add like a bunch of summonable NPCs to certain places. I don't know specifically where, but I do remember thinking as I was playing through it, like I remember playing through Dark Souls 2 and 3, and on every other boss, usually there was just an NPC sign you could summon if you wanted to play single player but still have some help. And Elden Ring, very, very rarely did I have an NPC I could summon. And I thought I chalked that up to a little bit just like, okay, I haven't done whatever quest was related to this. Like, it's kind of a reward for completing those quest lines. So that naturally, if you're able to like follow those quests more deliberately, you could then get rewarded for it. Maybe not by an item, but being able to summon the NPC for the boss. But I guess, I don't know specifically where, but they say they just added summonable NPCs to several boss fights. They did lower the FP cost and increase the damage of several of the sorceries, which to me, I read that and makes sense because a lot of the sorceries I would get like these like Glimmerstone Comet. I'm like, oh, that sounds neat. Let me try it. And it's like, oh, this isn't as good as the Pebble that I already have, which is cheaper and does nearly as much damage. So I'm okay with them addressing the sorceries there and trying to make them more viable other than just the couple that people were spamming. They did add some, I guess, stages to certain quests and including some NPCs in general. I don't know the specifics of what they added, but that just seems like really interesting to see that was addressed so early in the game's life that it almost feels like free DLC in terms of now certain quests have certain additional components to them, which is kind of fun in alignment with the hopefully making the quest easier to follow with the new UI implementation.
Yeah, that just reminds me, like, there's not separate from the patch itself, but like the community has recently found out that there are some secret areas in the game that can only be accessed not by illusionary walls that like have to be hit multiple times for them to appear, like secret paths that like you have to hit multiple times to like get through a wall. So now that like, people are just freaking out now.
That's actually not quite accurate. The walls that people have found are very clearly like an oversight. Because not only do they not disappear as normal illusory walls do, but they just wrap right back around to a room that you can enter normally.
That's so sick. Thank you for software.
So maybe they're like debugging tools or something like. I'm trying to think like why would they exist then?
Yeah, the best guess I have is that they probably designed the illusory wall because there is like one section near there that has a proper illusory wall, which my guess is that they designed one type of wall for that illusory wall, and then they wanted to make it so that you wouldn't just normally be able to break the rest of the walls that look the same in that area. So they increased the HP, but they forgot to increase the defense at the same time. So if you hit the wall enough, it'll break, and you can just walk right through, even though it's not intended for it to be a proper illusory wall.
That's good.
Like, again, we don't know, but that's like the best guess I've seen people like push forward. It makes sense. It makes sense.
In related news, we did also learn about the first sales update for Elden Ring, and that it has sold 12 million units in total, with 1 million coming from Japan alone, which obviously is a massive success for From Software relative to their other games in their series. Like around the time that Dark Souls 3 released, a month after that, the whole franchise was at 13 million. So it's not that Elden Ring has sold more than the whole Dark Souls franchise, but it almost seems like it has the potential to. I don't know how much Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 have sold since 2016.
Like catalog sales in the last 5 years, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
probably quite a bit. But.
And you also have to factor in the like the Dark Souls 1 remaster and things like that. Like, how do you control the franchise? Like, what do you consider? What do you put in that bucket? But
yeah,
obviously,
like, is Bloodborne and Sekiro like also included in that?
Yeah.
I would say no on those, but then more question like Demon Souls, is that Dark Souls? No, yes, remaster of that. I don't know.
So I think, well, obviously 12 million sold is a massive, like a huge deal. I think the more interesting thing about the Elden Ring sales is actually the 1 million sold in Japan. Because if you go by the Famitsu sale tracker, like as of March 13th, and these sales for the 1 million sold in Japan is as of March 14th, so pretty closely aligned. Between PS4 and PS5, there were just shy of 390,000 physical copies sold, which means that either the digital share for consoles is way higher than people expected, which is insane for Japan, or in fact, even if the digital sales are super high, it seems possible, like shockingly enough, that it might be the case that the PC version's the best-selling SKU in Japan.
I don't know. That to me that seems unlikely. I think it's digital sales about pushing a lot of that number.
Well, but the thing is, though, is that would mean that there's more digital sales for Elden Ring than physical sales, and I don't even see, and I mean, I don't see that being the case in Japan. There's no way. And even if that was the case, that's still like over 200,000 copies sold on Steam, which is still a massive
it's still a significant number for the user base over there.
Either way, whether it's the best selling SKU or not, it's like there's a shocking number of PC sales in Japan, which it's like, wonder what's up with that. Like I've seen people saying,
I wonder if that's a historic legacy thing. Like I'm trying to remember how recent not just Souls games, but say Sekiro, for example, or and later Dark Souls games, how they sold on PC in Japan. I'm trying to remember if they had a busting scene for that or not. But these are still crazy numbers either way.
Yeah. One thing I did see some people speculate is that, and even some folks in Japan have said that PC gaming has been rising in recent years because of the believe it or not, the influx of VTubers.
Well, that's one way to get to revive PC gaming in Japan. Thank God.
I mean, it makes sense because I know. Yeah, it's crazy to think. It's that would make some sense.
Thank you for saving PC gaming Japan, VTubers. We owe it all to you. If more Japanese PC games come out on Steam or wherever, you have to thank VTubers.
Not all heroes wear capes.
True.
This week, we did get another extended look at the upcoming Eiyuden Chronicle Rising, which is the spin-off. I don't know if spin-off's the right word, but it's like
companion game.
Partner game, companion game for the upcoming Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, which is releasing next year, which Eiyuden Chronicle Rising is listed to release this year. We don't have a release date yet, other than soon. But we did get, thanks to IGN, had a exclusive preview access to this. 28 minutes of footage for this game that was linked from them. And I don't know how much excitement there is for this game. We've kind of talked about it previously. It's the side scroller action gameplay rather than the Suikoden inspired game of the 100 Heroes. But it's the first time we've been able to get extended look at the gameplay since Tokyo Game Show of last year. So I at least want to give it a shout out that we got a pretty meaty look of some of the environments, the 3 playable characters, and as we look forward to that game releasing at some point. So we always talk about we have been talking about how we've been filling in certain months like September and October have become pretty crowded pretty quickly, and April and May might be a little bit light, but this could drop in at any point. It seems like it's.
I think the interesting thing that Adam and I were talking about the other day in response to Eiyuden Chronicle Rising is the developer Natsume Atari. I wasn't aware that the origin of Natsume Atari was kind of, because there's just not Natsume Inc. that we know of for now making the Harvest Moon games that are really quote unquote the Harvest Moon developers, because they went off and did Story of Seasons. But remind me again, Adam, what is the inception of Natsume Atari?
So they're Natsume Inc.
which does like Harvest Moon and a few other things, and Natsume Atari are apparently just two separate companies with a similar name. Wikipedia puts it this way, and I know it's Wikipedia, but it says Natsume is the name of two video game publishers, Natsume Atari and Natsume Inc. They were once the same company, but now are completely separated. And Natsume Atari, who is the developer of Eiyuden Chronicle Rising here, they've mostly done, like, it seems like licensed like Nintendo DS games. They did a lot of the Metabot games. They did some like SpongeBob stuff. I'm looking at the Wikipedia. Power Rangers, some Nicktoons, Kamen Rider. It seems like they haven't done a lot recently. I'm guessing maybe like pachinko, like arcadey type stuff. So they're not really like, you know, a prestige developer, or even like, I don't even know what niche you would put them in, but they're the developer of this Rising game. So we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, so go ahead and give a look at the gameplay footage from IGN. We've got it linked on our site as well. So we'll see when that will land this year, because it's still slated for 2022. We got a release date that is soonly upcoming for the next Genshin Impact update, Genshin Impact version 2.6. And whenever we have a Genshin Impact update, I always have to defer to our local expert, Chow Min Woo, to tell me what I'm looking at, because a lot of this is just like proper nouns and names that I don't know like how significant they are.
Yeah, Chow, you're on the field. How is the Genshin out there? What's the weather looking like? What's the...
Well, the last update's really good. The last update was, what was it? It's to conclude the Raiden Shogun arc storyline. So, yeah, the last update's really good. But this new update, I don't know what to expect yet. We finally get to see Ayaka's brother, Ayato. He was mentioned a lot in the story, but you never actually see him until now.
5-star Hydro Swordsman. Do we need more Hydro characters? Is that filling a gap in the roster?
There is not too many Hydro characters that, or at least not really good 5-star characters. Not too many. There's Tarkatala, or Child, whatever you like to call him. There is Kokomi, who is either meta or really bad, depending on who you talk to. And
this is fucking classic gacha talk right here. It's either meta or shit, depending on who you talk to.
And then there is Mona, and now we finally got our 5-star.
What element is Ganyu?
Ganyu is Cairo, ice. It's not
ice.
Quite the
Ice
same.
is different than water.
Cryo. Yeah, I know some games where water and ice is basically the same element because it's water, right? But here it's two separate elements.
Stranger Paradise differentiates them. You have blizzard and water.
It's like,
see, that's the way it is now.
I forgot to ask you during Stranger Paradise. Do they call the water? Do they call the magic the fire fire ja, or whatever it's called?
Yeah, they do that.
So for water, it's like water ga.
Okay, I was thinking it's like maybe they might have renamed it to like Final Fantasy 14 style, or the old school way where it's fire 1, 2, 3, 4.
They do it for like in the Tyrion class when like I'm imbuing like elements to like my fists. They have like in Fire 1 and Fire 2 and Fire 3, stuff like that. So it's sort of there.
But yeah, we finally get Ayaka's brother. He basically looks like a Virgil.
I hope we see gameplay of this dude soon, because apparently the leaked ones have all been taken down because
Oh, I've seen the leaks. You could see
because Ayaka apparently was already like Virgil, and then now you're saying no, there's like really more Virgil. I'm like, okay,
this is even more Virgil. This guy is like literally blinking, doing slashes.
Okay,
so it's like if you think Ayaka is Virgil, this guy is.
Does it just run in the family? Are they just like the Virgil family? Is that what they're known for?
Probably. I mean,
do they have like a dad or a mom that will get introduced? It's like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm also Virgil. Like, all right.
probably not. But...
or if they have any siblings, it's like, yeah, I'm also Virgil, by the way. It's like, wow, that's crazy. You guys have
runs in the family.
I want to be part of this family.
So this update comes out on March 30th, so a little over a week from time of recording. And it does also include a new area in the Liu region, Liyue, called Chasm.
Yeah, this region's been leaked back like a year ago, and everyone just thought it was a hoax because it never was implemented in the game during the patch that people assumed it was. So I guess it's finally finished, and now it's finally implemented into the game now, you know?
Are there like any like new gameplay features that this new patch is coming out with? Any like cool modes?
There's a mode where you duel this dude, and in this mode you can't use your like elemental abilities, and you only get to use the protagonist, and it's like kind of like a one-on-one sword fight, you know, and you can test your skills on how good you're parrying of your sword, I guess. What kind of gameplay is that? I would try to say maybe it's like Neo. I mean, we talk about Neo a lot. I mean, you're trying to use like a samurai here, and you're trying to.
Yeah, I'm thinking like Metal Gear Rising, where it's like very parry heavy.
Yeah, there's that one new mode. There is there's more stuff implemented into the house building mode, which is the teapot. Now you can plant your plants and stuff, see how your flower grows. It seems like a very simple update. I mean, I think the big update was the previous patch. But there is a new region, and people love exploring new regions in Genshin, so that's basically it.
I will say, as before we move on, like this is the most positive I've heard you talk about Genshin in like any of these updates. So the last
because the last patch has a good story update.
Okay,
I'm not really into like stories all the time, but when there's a good story update, it keeps me motivated.
All right, you heard it here, folks. If you've been soured by some subpar updates for Genshin, it sounds like 2.5 was pretty damn good, and 2.6 is coming soon. So vetted by our local expert.
Thank you, Chow. You may not have saved the PC gaming market in Japan like VTubers, but you'll do what you can for Genshin.
And speaking of gacha games, that seems like a really silly segue, but it's the world we live in now. We got an announcement of a new PC game based on Arc Knights. So I don't know much about Arc Knights other than that it has been relatively popular, and I see it talked about in the Mobige channel on our Discord here at RPG Site. I know a few people that play this game. And Arc Knights Enfield has been announced for PC and mobile devices, and we've got a new like CG trailer as well as a gameplay demo for the game that kind of give us a very high-level overview of how this game plays. We know that it is a real-time 3D RPG with strategic elements, but as I watched through this CG trailer and gameplay demo of Arc Knights Enfield, I can't answer the begged question, is this a gacha? I don't know for certain. I don't know if you were able to like glean anything more from this footage, Josh, because you might know the mobile game a bit better than me, but it's hard to tell whether this is like just a PC equivalent based on the same universe, but not a gacha game, or if this is just another gacha game.
Yeah, so what I understand, so the original Arc Knights game for mobile devices is it's one of the more unique ones out there because it's a tower defense game. So you have incoming hordes, and you place your characters like towers, and they all have their special abilities that you can level up, and they have like their different classes and that tower defenses, and then so it has like the whole package on like if you're a tower defense player and you really like that kind of gameplay, that game is for you, and it's pretty good at that, and a lot of people really like it. This game seems to be like a more Genshin inspired take on Arc Knights. The gameplay demo that was introduced is like kind of running around like open like it's more, you know, you're not placing down units on a tower defense. It seems to be like you're controlling the character directly, and like from the brief things that they've shown in the demo, like you kind of there are some places where you have to like kind of maneuver around like environmental hazards. As for the actual gameplay itself, and what you're gonna be doing, like interacting with the game, we don't actually know yet. But from like speaking with people that play the game, like this seems to be like in a whole new take on it. There's like no carryover characters from Arc Knights that they've shown. These are all new characters and all new cast so far. Who knows if it'll have a gacha element? I have to assume it will have some sort of gacha element if it's coming to mobile devices as well as PC, like maybe a Genshin style type of release.
It's from the developer. They have never made anything that does not use the gacha model. I mean, you make so much money from it. Why would you switch?
Yeah, my gut take is like this will be a free to play game, like free to install, and then like if you want to like get characters or equipment or however you do stuff in this game, that'll be behind a gacha system. on that. So that's my read on it. They haven't really mentioned too much about like more about this game, just an initial teaser. So might be cool. It might be like if it's like I'd be interested to see how they adapt. If they try to adapt the tower defense gameplay model of Ark Knights into this, but now that it's like a 3D like open field almost. So like, are you going to be like, hey, do you have to like use like a character to like place down units, and then you see everything just in 3D now?
Oh, I forgot to mention the Genshin update has the tower defense minigame that used to come out all the time. Now that has a big update for that minigame. So maybe they'll copy the same idea. Who knows?
Yeah. Maybe Ark just like, we're coming for you. That's the one thing about Genshin that we're really gonna fucking nail. I'll be like, no, this will be our angle. So who knows?
It's like I do want there's more competition though. I just feel like Genshin has taken up this entire market, and they've been they haven't done anything to improve like the gacha system. So I just hope there's more competition to it.
There's the Genshin cynicism we were missing. There we go.
Like you also have like that upcoming like Tower of Fantasy game that looks a lot like Genshin. It's like an MMO, I think. So
they announced the developers Hypergriff said that this was early in development. There is no release date. The gameplay demo that we did get was about a minute of footage, which is mostly, like Josh said, just kind of showing the field environment and not a lot of the gameplay or combat systems. A little bit, but not much. So I'm guessing it'll be a while before we see more of this. But for anyone who currently plays Ark Knights, you could go to our Discord channel, and I'm sure you'll find some kindred spirits. And B, we have a new PC release to look forward to, even though it seems like it might be a ways away. A couple of release dates that we'll roll through pretty quickly. This one was one that I don't know much about, but I wanted to highlight it here because I just think on principle, it seems really fun and really smart. And that is Dungeons and Dragons Gold Box Classics are coming to Steam on March 29th. And the list of games here is quite extensive. And a lot of these I've never heard of. And a lot of these are from like circa early 90s CRPGs. Eye of the Beholder 1, 2, and 3, like the Champions of Krynn series, Shattered Lands, Wake of the Ravager. I don't know much about these, but
I think I played the original on the Sega CD, or one of the games. I think it was the Beholder one. I think it was.
Yeah, I think the Eye of the Beholder is the one that I think like, I remember that growing up. I don't remember playing it because
I also know Pool of Radiance is one I've heard some decent stuff about, as in like an old DOS RPG.
Yeah, I've only heard of Eye of the Beholder out of these as well.
So what this is, so it ends up being like a total of like over a dozen titles, and packaged under a single launcher with an updated version of DOSBox to have them be as like compatible as possible to play on modern systems. And I just think that this is really neat because it's just kind of in the service of not letting these games be lost to history sort of thing, kind of just in a preservation mode where if someone played these games, maybe someone slightly older than most of us had good memories of this and they want to re-experience it. You've got an option here to get it packaged, and we'll have to see if like how compatible they are and how they run. And they haven't really been modernized, but just hopefully just made available, so that people can experience these and kind of, as almost like a history lesson or as kind of a discography of where games like Baldur's Gate or whatever, or then future entries or Dungeons and Dragons inspired games that ended up coming from.
A lot of these, if not all of them, have been on GOG for like years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like I have the Beholder. I'm almost positive I have in my GOG.
I don't think they're available anymore though, or something. It's weird. They were available, but they're not, or some of them were on GOG, and now they're not.
What about that Capcom Dungeons and Dragons game? Is that pulled off too, or is that
I think these are older than that.
I know they're older than that, but are they been like pulled off because of licensing issues and stuff? Because these things are always messy when it comes to license, right?
Which one was that? Chronicles of Mystara?
Yeah, there's a Tower of Doom. There's a Shadow of Mysteria.
Yeah, I don't.
I wonder if they get pulled off like the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 problem, whereas you can never buy it.
Yeah.
So it looks like a quick check that the Forgotten Realms, the Eye of the Beholder is on GOG, Krynn is on GOG. I wonder if Dark Sun is. I guess
Scott
is this is
3.
this is why we brought Scott on. He's able to kind of correct us. So it looks like, a lot of these have been available on Good Old Games. So I will eat crow for that. But I guess, there's something to say for visibility on Steam. Maybe, I don't know. I'm trying to like.
Certainly. Like a lot of people like turn to only Steam for like all their gaming stuff, and like obviously GOG isn't as popular as Steam. Certainly for some sections of like older games, yes, but when it comes to the majority of people,
and it's hard to say whether this is exclusive to the Steam release or has already been present in the GOG release, but it says they'll be coming to Steam later this month. Not only that, but many of the games will be enhanced to feature companion apps, a unified launcher, a character party transfer tool, and customized DOSBox updates. So I don't know if that's already in place or not. It's not quite clear, but whether you get them on one storefront or the other, I still do think in principle that it's cool that these are made available. So my bad.
I'm curious. I'm curious. Do any of you play tabletop RPGs, or are you pretty much all video game or PC RPG players?
I have infrequently
now. Yeah, I've done
it before.
Yeah, I've done it a few times. I'm definitely more of a video game player.
A friend invited me to do it, but I don't know. I never tried it, so I don't know anything about it. They said they would need to find a good dungeon master if we want to play Dungeons and Dragons or something like that.
I have done the whole Discord plus Roll20 sort of thing where you play it like digitally. I've only done that like 2 or 3 times, but it was fun.
Okay.
The hardest part is finding a DM GM who's really committed to it, at least in my experience.
I'll DM for Candyland and Monopoly.
Okay, so I'm probably the biggest one here then, because I play in multiple games. I run a game.
Yeah, I have friends
who
are
a couple
big,
weekly games. So
yeah, I have friends who are big into tabletop RPGs that have like weekly meetups for that, and they always have fun with that.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah,
we got a release date for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. We kind of knew that it was coming out in the summer, and we now have a date. It will release on June 30th, and it'll release for Nintendo Switch and PC at the same time. So I think this is the first time that's happened. Like finally,
yeah.
Jesus.
And they confirmed when they announced Rise PC. Well, when they announced Sunbreak in the first place, it was going to be a simultaneous release. So that's cool.
Yeah, they showed off a lot of stuff. Like we have Astalos is coming back.
Yeah,
Sunbreak.
They showed off a lot of stuff. I'm not sure if you feel the same way, Josh, but it's like they showed a lot of stuff.
It's not enough.
Yeah, not the types of things that I needed to see to get excited.
Yeah, I need to see a lot more. I mean, they showed off obviously they showed off a new variant for was the breakdancing monster that threw fruit. They had showed off a new variant for that monster. They showed off some new Silkbind attacks. They showed off the new hub, which is like a more medieval fantasy themed hub, which is really a stark contrast to where we were in Rise.
I do like the new hub. It looks
it looks cool. It looks cool. Yeah. But I was hoping to see a little bit more, but we'll see.
Josh is excited about the quest giver.
Yes, she wears glasses and she's great.
I love how people are coming to the conclusion that the blacksmith is one of the blacksmiths from Monster Hunter 4, because if you look at their designs, there's a lot of design similarities.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
So it's but I agree with you that they showed off a good chunk, and they showed off a new monster as well, and it's like a rampaging monkey, armored monkey type of thing.
I guess one neat thing is that it seems like since Rise was like yokai based for a lot of the monster designs, it seems like between the vampire dragon and the very clearly Frankenstein's monster that they're kind of going for a Western spook aesthetic this time around.
Yeah, they have like a trio of monsters known as like the Three Lords, I think. That was their terminology for it was.
And it's like a werewolf, Frankenstein's monster, and a vampire. It's like,
We get to see edgy armor sets again, with everyone trying to get on Astalos sets, full Astalos sets.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying. Well, I can't speak for you, but I'm definitely going to play it. I guess since April is going to be a bit of a quieter month, that's a good chance for me to get caught up on Rise PC, especially with the Defender weapons, making it easier to get caught up.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, where I started Rise PC, but I haven't really gotten very far. I'm like, all right, now I have a due date almost.
Yep.
I'm all good here. I just need to reacclimate myself with the controls like shortly before release. Like, oh yeah, how did this game play again?
Yeah.
Oh, every time. We got a release window for the upcoming tactical RPG Lost Eidolons. It will release in Q3 of this year for Xbox consoles or just the Xbox Series consoles and PC. And this originally had a closed beta earlier, but it will get a second one in April. And this is one I remember us shouting out earlier in one of the podcast episode from several months ago. It's basically just like Western fantasy Fire Emblem, which I thought was pretty neat. So it'll be releasing later this year, and I don't know if I'll take part in the beta test, but that'll be next month. And you can sign up either on PC or Xbox for it. And we got a new trailer for it as well.
A lot of strategy RPGs this year, huh?
Yeah, it seems like it for sure.
Yep. It's the hip new thing, don't you know?
Oh, it's a good thing. I like strategy RPGs before they were cool. Okay, one of the OGs.
And speaking of strategy RPGs, I'm sorry, we got a sales update for Triangle Strategy. Maybe I should have brought this up when I was talking about it earlier. It has sold 800,000 units, almost 800,000 units worldwide, which I think is a good sign for kind of a niche genre that kind of released in a crowded month. So I believe it took I don't know how long it took Octopath to sell 1 million, but it seems like it's
about a month.
Around the same pace. So this was after 2 weeks. So the 800,000 mark is 2 weeks in. So I think that seems pretty good to me.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that I'm really glad that it's taking off. Like from where I'm sitting and from the circles that I kind of take a peek at, it feels like there's been a more muted response for this game. I don't see a lot of people talking about it.
It seems like there's more energy around Elden Ring still and Stranger of Paradise.
Yeah. So, but it's cool to see that this game has taken off.
I'm surprised it even sold that much. I was expecting maybe 300,000 copies most.
Yeah.
The possible, the cynic and the most cynical way you could look at this is that Nintendo just massively overshipped to retailers or something. But that's only if you want to be a cynic.
Yeah,
we're never cynics. We're always optimists here.
That's cool. I mean, I'm glad that strategy RPGs are still very alive and well, and that a more closer to Final Fantasy Tactics Ogre type of strategy RPG can sell this well still in the modern day. That's crazy to me.
Definitely good to see. With as hesitant as Square has been, it seems like anymore to do this kind of old school Tactics Ogre / tactics style of game, to see it doing well in such a short amount of time.
It's it's certainly because this kind of strategy RPG, a certain flavor to it. Not a lot of people will gravitate towards it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an acquired taste almost.
So we have a couple other little footnotes here at the very end, just a couple interesting tidbits of news, and one of which is about Fullmetal Alchemist, the mobile game. And I don't know much about this, but Josh just told me I have to talk about this. So, Josh.
I will never forgive Square Enix and whoever else. They released a new trailer for this Fullmetal Alchemist mobile game. It was announced a few months back, and I hate it because it actually looks pretty cool. It plays out as a strategy RPG, but then the battle scenes play out like a 3D arena fighting game. So you don't have to actually play that part. It's just the strategy RPG part, and the whole presentation and graphical quality and fidelity to it look really fucking cool, and all the icons for characters in the strategy RPG part have custom icons for what they do, and it's really adorable. And fuck man, Fullmetal Alchemist is such a cool property, and to see this new cool game, and it's but it's a mobile game structure, and then you can already see the stamina currency and gacha currency and whatever else on it. And I'm just heartbroken a little because it looks really cool. Yeah, I will
So you wanted to bring it up because it looks interesting, but you can kind of already see through the framework and knowing how the game actually like operates.
Because you go through the story of that game and like all the significant events, and then like the story is laid out like sort of like how Valkyria Chronicles like did like a newspaper aesthetic for its stage selection. It has that, and like I'm really a sucker for that as well. Man, Fullmetal Alchemist deserves better. I mean, this looks already great, but if this was like just not a mobile gacha game,
what can I say? They're chasing after that gacha money. It's gonna end up like Blaze Blue Dark War all over again.
No, there's no. This looks significantly better than Blaze Blue Dark War. People actually gobble this up because it actually looks like the production values actually look really fucking good for this game, unlike Dark War. So yeah, that's my little tidbit of like.
We also got an update in case anyone was looking forward to it. EA Play Live, which is EA's summer E3 adjacent thing, is skipping this year. So they say they will reveal more when the time is right, but it just won't be this summer. They aren't lining up to show you everything on one day.
Or tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of BioWare fans cry in sorrow.
Yeah, basically. This is such a weird thing to associate with EA Play, but I went to the one that was like E3 2018. It was one of the very first ones they did. And I just remember the chairs they had were like ass destroyers. They were just like the most uncomfortable seating arrangements ever. So that's what I associate with EA Play Live, for better or for worse. But we will not have one this year digitally or obviously in person.
They had like weird influencer slip ups during the broadcast.
Oh yeah, where they just like highlighted they got the streamers to play Battlefront 2 or whatever, and it was just I don't know, seemed very kind of wide net approach.
Yeah, EA still has like a lot to fucking show. Like we still don't know anything about the new Mass Effect or the new Dragon Age.
It's possible. Really. I know there's like murmurs now that like Jedi Fallen Order 2 will be announced on May the 4th.
Oh, okay.
We'll see.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, they already alluded that they're working on a follow up to that, so that'll be interesting to see. Who knows what any of these will ship if this year. They have that Dead Space remake that was recently announced to come early next year.
And there's the spiritual successor to Dead Space that was announced before the remake too.
The one that takes place in the PUBG universe.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. What was that called?
Oh god, the something protocol, the Callisto Protocol, I think.
Oh yeah, I remember like when that was announced. It was like the fact that it was like connected to PUBG was just like hidden in like the press release or whatever, like in a random sentence. It's like, wait, what?
That's like the headliner thing of that. Like that's like the main thing. That's like the most memorable thing about it. It's like. It's made by the original devs of Dead Space, and it's set in the PUBG universe. And it's and like the team's like on the moon. It's like, yes, I remember all the fucking PUBG matches on the moon.
I still haven't quite registered or worked through that PUBG has a universe at all.
The thing I love about PUBG is all the crazy fucking collaborations that the mobile game has. Like they're having one for like Warframe. And then previously they've done it like with like Haruhi Suzumiya and Gak, and it's just all over the place. Like
I'm still not over Naruto.
Yeah, if you're a property on this earth, you probably collabed with PUBG Mobile.
And the last bit is another thing that Josh was eager to talk about, and this involves Lost Ark, which obviously we talked about at length on a couple podcasts back in February when it released. Amazon and Smilegate, the developer, have released a message to fans about one of the more recent updates that has been somewhat contentious. Josh, give me the context, and is this message a good one or a frustrating one?
This message is an okay one to at least acknowledge, but obviously actions speak louder than words, so who knows? This is about the very divisive, contentious decision to release an endgame raid early in the game's life cycle in the West. This is the Argos raid that you need an item level of 1370, which is pretty damn high to reach to even access it and start doing it. And then you'll get a lot of like really good end game equipment out of it to start upgrading that. So that's kind of the real big allure of it. But they released it like just barely a month after the game has launched in the West. And that to many people, me included, feel that it was way too soon. And they even acknowledge in this message that it was released way too soon because now people like me have this big like lingering FOMO feeling, even though it shouldn't be, but it I'm like trying to like get to that 1370 item level, and the amount of mats to reach that item level at this point in the game so early on is absurd, because it's so, the ways you accrue those upgrade mats are very limited, and like it will make you feel pressure to like buy more of those mats from the marketplace, which require gold. And like you can earn gold through the game through organic means, but you can also use real money to buy gold and then purchase them directly that way. And those mats already on the marketplace in the West are already inflated from other regions because of like bots and other external factors that are inflating that marketplace. So right now the game is just not at a great state of like end game, where a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm missing out on Argos and have to make this trek to 1370. And like the chances, like everything in the game when it comes to upgrading is based on chance. So like early on in your upgrades, we have 100% chance, but then as you get further and further into the game and get like higher gear and like start upgrading them to increase your item level, the chance to have a successful upgrade on a certain, like say my weapon, I want to get it to like plus 13 to plus 14 because that'll raise my item level, it'll make it more powerful. It requires a lot of mats per attempt to upgrade this, and the base like chance to upgrade this just like on your first time is like 15%, and then after every successive failure, that percentage will go up by like 1.5 to 2%, and then it'll reach like once if you fail all those upgrades after consuming all those mats per attempt, it'll eventually reach a pity state of like 30%, and like it'll automatically jump to 100% chance because you reached like a pity state, saying, okay, you can have now this free upgrade because you failed so many times to upgrade it. And that just feels, it's like soul crushing almost. So, and you really, really want to try to get to that item level 1370. So it just feels bad because you're trying to work towards something that like other people have already access to. Maybe a lot of your friends have already access to because, they really game the market, or some of them may have put in real money for, a crazy low chance to, upgrade stuff. And it just feels really bad. So, Smilegate and Amazon Games, coincidentally enough, this message came out a day later after popular YouTuber Asmongold put out a message, addressing this problem to the public and to his followers. And he's obviously a really, really, really big influencer in that field. So I'm sure the timing is just coincidental, and they maybe were already planning to release this message, I have to assume, because it was just a day later. But this has been like the hot topic surrounding Lost Ark weeks after the game has launched in the West, and it does feel a little bit bad. So in response to this problem, the Smilegate and Amazon Games are starting to reconsider the rollout of future end game raids, because originally they were supposed to have like a new end game raid after Argos to hit like I think sometime next month, and it's like and that's already a higher item level to go in. And it's like maybe they're reconsidering pushing that back and trying to get the player base to like a comfortable state. I have to imagine, but who knows? They haven't really specified yet on if they're going to do that. But as a way to hopefully fix some problems now, they're starting to like inject some honing materials into the economy with new event stuff, like Event Guardian Raids, which is like the Monster Hunter mode. They're gonna start implementing that into the game sometime soon. I think next week. I'll see how that rolls out for maybe getting my upgrades there. They also will have adjustments to the ongoing event, the Grand Prix event, which is kind of like a light Mario Kart mode, which is pretty fun. Like it shows up at certain times of the day, and then like you can like race other players around obstacles for that. And then there's an event shop because you get currency from that and other dailies to like exchange to an event shop vendor to get honing materials and other helpful materials that are just strictly upgrade related. and then they'll finally roll out like the PvP shop, because like they'll be adding ranked PvP, and then after you participate in ranked PvP, you'll get currency from that, where you can exchange it to like another shop vendor for more of that stuff. And then they'll have gifts, including like new animal skins, new Makoko pet selections, and other goodies and rewards. But they've addressed it. They said, "Hey, we made a misstep rolling this Argos raid out too soon," and hopefully they get this game back on the right track, because it is a really, really cool game that I want to continue.
And it's still doing really well on Steam, right?
Yeah, it's still doing pretty well. It has like maybe over 500k concurrent players. Usually,
it's just hard not to compare it to something like New World that had like was flash in the pan, then immediately fell off. It seems like this one has some staying power.
Yeah,
it's slightly more popular right now than Babylon's Fall. By just a little bit. Just slightly.
I was gonna say, would they have like the Korean roadmap to know some kind like this and would prevent some kind of mistake? Because I could have sworn that they did something stupid in the Korean version, and they said that they wouldn't do anything as stupid in the Amazon.
I mean, the first year of Lost Ark was like hell, from what I heard. Like in Korea, like I don't know too much about because I didn't really read up on like the life cycle of the game, but there have definitely been like some pitfalls. Especially like the Japan version of Lost Ark, there seems to be like a whole can of worms surrounding that release that like I kind of read up on, but I didn't understand too much. So I mean, it just seems to be it's a normal thing for an MMO to like kind of have its ups and downs. So hopefully
it's fine. It's kind of stupid. It's like you already like know someone screwed up over there, and you could use that those missteps to prevent it.
Yeah, it's difficult, because like it's hard for just from the offset right now to not feel like, hey, like the Western version doesn't seem to feel like the priority for them, because at a certain point in the game when you reach level 50, you'll get like these event timers, because there are numerous events in the game that are very time sensitive. Some only appear in certain days, some only appear at certain hours of the day, and they all have like important stuff to collect in those things, like if you're working towards a specific thing in the game. And like those in-game like timers you can customize to like say, hey, only alert me for this like certain type of event because that's what I need. But all those times were screwed up in daylight because of daylight savings time, and that only got corrected just barely yesterday. So it's been almost like a full week of this just like totally being like off sync, and that's like for some like important events in the game. And I understand that like it must be very difficult from a very programming standpoint to like kind of fix that. But they announced that like, hey, I think it was like Sunday or Monday, like, hey, we're gonna roll out a patch that'll fix this. Like, okay, cool. Like, it was off for a little bit, and then they roll out that patch, and it seemingly did like absolutely nothing. There's no change and like no communication on to say, oh, like we acknowledge that it's still broken. So like I'd have been more forgiving if like they didn't even like just announce anything at all, saying like, hey, we're gonna have a patch that'll fix this, and then they rolled it out and they fixed nothing. And then like there were already like certain patches that like broke like certain like monster hunter monsters like cycles, like in an attempt to balance them for like early game, like they kind of made them break in new ways. So it's just like it's kind of like this weird tug of war thing of like what are we doing here? Like they acknowledge this. Yes, that's a good first step, but actions speak louder than words. So we'll see how it goes. Well,
it sounds like they're saying the right things mostly, even though sometimes their timing seems to be off in terms of announcing a fix and then not quite fixing it until later. So
sounds like politicians right now.
Yeah,
a little bit.
So hopefully it gets back on the right track. Like hopefully this is like this early misstep. It's going to be like a blip, and as time goes on, it's like, okay, thankfully they finally eventually reach a place where like everyone's satisfied, because like it's now hard to like it's hard to like implement like severe changes, because like eventually like in Korea and in Russia they eventually like released an update that like made like this part of the game much more forgiving, in the sense that like they boosted like honing chances, and they made it so less mats were consumed per attempt on that. But they eventually got to that after more and more updates down the line, and they didn't want to like introduce that too early for whatever reason in the West. So now they can't easily implement that at this moment to like address this whole ordeal, because now the people who have reached that state would feel like they got gypped if they introduced that change, for the people who really grinded up to that level and consumed like, a shitload. They would feel like, oh, you're fucking me by doing that. It's finicky now. It's like a weird balance. So we'll see how that goes. I have one more thing to share. This was listed as the last thing on our Google Doc, but I have one more thing to share before we close it out.
Yes.
So on let's see, March 18th at 9:14 a.m. Pacific daylight time, the Babylon's Fall _EN Twitter tweets, "Today we have revealed new information about version 1.1.0, the Nier Automata collaboration event, and the future of Babylon's Fall development." This is what they put one of those great text images in Twitter because they had something more to say. So here is what it says. All in caps, the question: is the continuing service in danger? They respond, no. There are no plans to reduce the scale of development on Babylon's Fall. Content up to the end of Season 2 is now practically complete, and we have started to work on Season 3 and beyond. We will continue to provide new content for the game and make improvements based on player feedback, striving to keep existing players playing and to attract newcomers. We would like to thank all Sentinels already enjoying the world of Babylon's Fall, as we look forward to welcoming more of you in the future. By the Babylon's Fall development team.
Well, at least they sound really confident. They sound they're establishing their stance.
They have really strong faith.
Yeah, I hope for them that they manage to make things better, but I'm not going to play that game unless they absolutely completely change the graphical style.
It is wild to me that barely 2 weeks after the game has launched, they already have to put up this thing say, is the continuing service in danger?
Well, I mean, Josh, let's put it in perspective. There's currently more people playing Final Fantasy XI than Babylon's Fall.
Yeah, but Final Fantasy XI is still popular. I mean, if you talk to some random strangers, they always say, "Oh, it's my favorite game of all time." I still go back to it sometimes.
I'm not so sure about that, but the point being is that a nearly 20-year-old Square MMO has more active players than a just released Games as a Service.
Well, if VTubers can save PC gaming in Japan, can they save Babylon's Fall?
Well, and what's strange is really the co-op aspect of Stranger fills very much the same hole as Babylon's Fall wants to.
Yeah, oddly enough, like the combat in Stranger is probably what the combat should have been in Babylon's Fall, to be honest. How responsive, yeah, I agree with you there. So we'll see. They are very adamant in saying, look, we already have Season 2 fucking done. And we promise you, we're about to start work on Season 3. And after that. So it's really funny how the way they phrased it. It's just like, alright, I guess. Thank you. And I have to wonder, because Adam and I were talking about this, like, why the fuck would you do this? Why would you... This seems like a bad move to, just share, But in my mind, it's like, maybe they're just trying to, kind of encourage people.
The bleeding.
They're trying to reassure people. It's like, okay, no, don't worry. If you buy it right now, we promise you won't stop support. It's cool. It's cool. We're cool, right? It's cool.
We have no plans to change the incoming content for Babylon's Fall tweet is causing a lot of questions that we do not have any plans to change the incoming Babylon's Fall content tweet has already answered.
Yeah, and friend of the site, Tony, who has been playing it and keeping us informed on how Babylon's Fall is doing. Apparently, the event stuff is super grindy as well, and that doesn't feel good. And apparently there were new patches in Babylon's Fall, and to introduce events to get people to play together. for some story stuff, and he's like, even then with all that, I still can't matchmake with other people. I still can't find any people to go to go through this content with. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, at first there was the argument that it was like he had early access and then people just weren't playing yet, but now it's like he still can't get people.
Rip.
I was just like, well,
the Steam numbers, and granted, you have more people playing on consoles or the PlayStation that's not taken into account, but I mean, all-time high of like 360 people for something like that ain't sunshine and rainbows, you know.
I mean, are we sure that there's really that many more people playing on PlayStation? Really, though?
No.
I don't know. It sounds like sunk cost fallacy at this point. It's like maybe they put so much money on this and they just can't let it bomb.
Okay. Well, I have to imagine at this very moment, do you think more than 1,000 people are playing that game across all consoles?
No. Say no.
Good vote of confidence.
I just find it amazing that like it's still implied that Sony paid to keep this game off of Xbox.
Thumbs up.
You know,
you win some, you lose some.
Well, that covers it for our news rundown for this episode of the podcast. So getting a few more release dates and a few more updates on some live service games, some seemingly good like Genshin Impact and optimistic, and some not so much like Babylon's Fall. But maybe we will be eating crow in a year because they just have so many neat things planned.
I promise you I'll eat crow if this game's more popular.
I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll turn it around like they did before. I can't finish that
sentence. I recently watched a live a live stream, not a live stream, but like a VOD of like a live stream that happened hours ago for Babylon's Fall, showing off the Nier collab content. Maybe, man. Maybe that's what it needs.
Yeah, because the Nier collab is that's a white whale that you never see anywhere else. People will come to Babylon's Fall for that because you can't get that anywhere else.
Obviously not. No other property has ever gotten a Nier collab besides this game.
I mean, it's not like we just got a remake of the first Nier game last year or anything. I mean, we just haven't gotten Nier games.
It's true. That's true.
If you haven't played Replicant version 1.2, it's still a good game and you should play it. There. We're ending this on a high note.
Yeah, there you go.
So thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for joining Scott to talk about your experience with Stranger of Paradise. And
of course, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for sticking around through the whole podcast, even through the news section. And we will likely talk about Stranger of Paradise maybe next week, depending on if we get more people time to get through it. But otherwise, yeah, March is a packed month, and we'll be talking about all the other games that release as we get to Triangle Strategy or to Relayer or to Atelier Sophie 2 back from February. We'll see what people fit into their schedules and what ends up being the topic du jour once we get to those. We do have the 3 reviews up on the site for Stranger of Paradise, for Atelier Sophie 2, and for ChocoboGP. Maybe we can convince Colin, if we give him enough heads up, to talk about his experience with that game in person. Otherwise, you can go ahead and read his thoughts on the site. And we do also have the all the news that we talked about up on the site as well. And I will also shout out Adam's RPGs of 2022 list. If you just Google that, you should be able to find it pretty easily, because usually it's one of the top hits. For if you're not keeping track on what's releasing when, Adam does a really good job every week of making sure that stays updated, including both release dates and consoles that it releases on. You can find us on any social media platform. We have just search for RPG Site on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube. And we do have the Discord channel. You can hit the link at our top of our homepage, or just go to discord.gg/RPG Site. And we will be back next week with another episode of the Tetracast. So until then, stay safe, take care, and we'll talk to you later.
It's Jack time.